I can't do this anymore." Clara whispered, blood on her lip, her body folding toward the floor of a roadside diner at 2 in the morning, and the most feared man in Bellwood caught her before she fell. If you've ever felt like the world was designed to ignore people like you, this story is going to hit you somewhere deep. Follow our channel, watch until the very end, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The diner on Callaway Road had no business being open at 2:30 in the morning. It barely had business at noon. The fluorescent light above the entrance buzzed and flickered like it was deciding whether to keep working, and the handful of people scattered across the booths inside had the look of people who had nowhere better to be. A trucker nursing his third coffee. A young couple barely speaking. An old man with a newspaper folded to the crossword pen untouched. And in the corner booth, farthest from the door, furthest from the windows, with a cup of black coffee he hadn't touched, and eyes that watched everything without appearing to watch anything at all, Adrian Moretti. Nobody sat near him. Nobody tried. The waitress on duty, a tired woman named Patrice, who had worked this shift for 11 years, moved around him the way water moves around a stone, quietly, carefully, without looking directly at the stone itself. Adrian Moretti was 45 years old, and he had the kind of face that people remembered without wanting to. Not ugly. Not handsome in any warm way. Just precise. Like every line had been put there deliberately. He wore a dark jacket, no tie, a shirt buttoned to the collar. His hands rested on the table. Still. The hands of a man who had learned that stillness communicates more than movement. He had come to the diner because he couldn't sleep, and he couldn't sleep because Daniel had told him something 3 hours ago that he hadn't been able to shake loose. Something about the Hale properties on the east side of town. Something that made his jaw tighten every time he let himself think about it. He was thinking about it now. Which is why it took him a moment, just a moment, a single second longer than usual, to process what he was hearing. The door, not opening smoothly, hitting the frame wrong like the person pushing it didn't have the strength to push it right. Then a sound. Not a voice. Not words, not yet. Just breath. A specific kind of breath. The kind that comes from someone who has been crying so long and so hard that even the crying has run dry, and what's left is this raw scraping sound from the throat. This animal sound of someone at the edge of what they can carry. Adrian looked up. She was 26 years old, though she looked younger and older at the same time in the way that exhaustion does to a person. Dark hair, loose and tangled. A server's uniform. Black pants. A pale yellow shirt that had been clean that morning and was not clean now. Her left hand was pressed against her side just below her ribs. Her right hand was on the doorframe holding herself up. Her lip was split. There was dried blood below her chin. Her right eye was swollen at the outside corner, not yet bruised to full color, but getting there, the skin already pulling tight and strange. She took one step inside, then another. Patrice came around the counter, already moving, her voice dropping low. "Honey, oh honey, what happened?" "I just need to sit down," Clara said. Her voice was barely there. I'm sorry to come in like this. I didn't know where else." Her knees buckled. Patrice wasn't close enough. Adrian was already out of his booth. He moved the way men move when they've spent decades being the fastest person in any room. Not rushing, not scrambling, just covering distance the way water covers ground, inevitable, and without wasted motion. He reached her before she reached the floor. His arm went around her back, his other hand steadying her elbow, and he took her weight without making it look like weight at all. "Easy," he said. Quiet. Not soft. Exactly nothing about Adrian Moretti was soft, but low. Measured. "I've got you." She flinched at the contact. Reflex, not thought. She turned her face away from him, and her whole body tensed the way bodies tense when they've recently learned that a person reaching for you means pain. "You're all right," he said, same tone, not moving closer, not pulling her, letting her adjust. "Nobody's going to touch you. I'm just keeping you standing. She turned her head slowly and looked at him. Her eyes were dark brown, and they had the hollowed-out look of someone who has spent hours being afraid and has come out the other side of fear into something quieter and more terrible. She looked at his face the way people look at strangers in the dark, trying to calculate whether this new thing was dangerous. He met her gaze, didn't look away, didn't rush her. "Can you walk to the booth?" he asked. "Just there. 3 steps." She nodded. Small, uncertain. He walked her to the nearest booth, the one 2 down from where he'd been sitting, and lowered her into the seat with more care than anyone who had ever seen Adrian Moretti operate would have believed he possessed. He stepped back immediately, giving her space, and looked at Patrice. "Water," he said, "and something warm, whatever you have." Patrice, who had been frozen at the counter watching this, shook herself and moved to the coffee machine. The trucker at the counter had turned to look. The young couple in the far booth, the old man with the crossword, all of them staring. Adrian turned to look back at them. He didn't say a word. They all looked away. He turned back to Clara. She had both hands on the table now, pressing flat, and he could see the trembling in her fingers. Not from cold. The diner was warm. It was the kind of shaking that comes from muscles that have been tensed for hours, locked against something, and don't quite know how to let go. "You're hurt," he said. "I'm fine." "You're not." He said it without heat. A statement, not an argument. "Your ribs. You've been holding your side since you came in." She looked down at her hand, still pressed there like she'd forgotten it. Like the pain had become so constant, she'd stopped registering it as a choice. "I tripped," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Okay," he said. She glanced up at him, surprised he'd let it go. He hadn't let it go. But he was not going to push. Not yet. Not here. Not when she was still shaking, and her eyes still had that raw, cornered look. Patrice brought water and a cup of soup canned from the back, the only thing she had that was hot. Clara wrapped both hands around the cup, and the trembling slowed a little, just the heat of it, helping something in her body to release. "Do you want me to call someone?" Patrice asked gently. "Is there someone?" "No." Fast. Hard. Then softer. "No, thank you. There's nobody." Patrice looked at Adrian. He gave the smallest shake of his head. She retreated to her counter and stayed there. Clara took a slow sip of the soup. Set the cup down. Stared at the table. Her jaw worked silently for a moment like she was composing something, and then she said without looking up, "He told me no one would believe me." Adrian said nothing. He said people like me, people with nothing we don't get, to make accusations against people like him. She pressed her fingers tighter against the cup. He said if I tried to tell anyone, he'd make sure I lost my job, lost my apartment. He said I'd be out on the street in a week, and I'd have nothing to show for it. Her voice cracked on the last word just slightly, and she steadied herself. "And the thing is, the thing that I can't stop thinking about, he's probably right." "What's his name?" Adrian said. She looked up then. Really looked at him, not the panicked assessment from the door, but something steadier. Trying to figure out who she was talking to. There was something about him, the stillness, the absolute lack of urgency, the sense that he had heard things far worse than this, and had not been moved by the hearing of them, only by what came after, that made the question feel different coming from him. "Victor Hale," she said. The name landed in this diner the way certain names land in certain rooms. Patrice behind the counter went very still. The trucker stared into his coffee. Adrian's expression didn't change. Not a single muscle moved. But something shifted in his eyes, a settling the way a decision settles, that was visible if you were watching closely enough, and Adrian Moretti was always watching closely enough. "How do you know him?" he asked. "He owns the building I live in." She looked back down at the table. "He owns the building the diner where I work is in. He owns half the rental properties on the east side. He owns a lot of things." A pause. "Including about 12 different ways to make my life disappear." How long has he been doing this? She was quiet. You don't have to tell me anything, he said. But I'm asking because I want to know, not because I need something from you. She studied him for another moment. 3 months, she said. It started when I was late on rent, $100 short. I was $100 short and he said... She stopped. Started again. He said he could make it go away. The late fee and the debt. He said it could just disappear if I was cooperative. The word came out coated in a disgust she hadn't let herself express yet, and it seemed to surprise her how much feeling was behind it. I told him no. I paid the $100. I scraped it together and I paid it. And I thought that was the end. It wasn't. It wasn't. She picked up the water glass, put it down without drinking. He came back. A different reason every time. A noise complaint that didn't exist. Maintenance work that never happened. A form I hadn't signed. Always something. Always with that same smile. Like we both knew what was really being said, and he was just patient enough to keep asking. Her voice had gone flat in a way that was worse than tears. Tonight I told him to stop. I said it clearly. I said I would. I said I would go to the police. Adrian waited. He laughed, she said. He just laughed, and then he stopped laughing. The silence in the diner was complete. The trucker had stopped moving. The coffee machine had gone quiet. I can't bear this pain anymore, Clara said, and her voice broke on the last word. Broke cleanly, like something that had been under pressure for too long and had finally reached the limit of what it could hold. I don't know what to do. I've done everything right. I work double shifts. I pay my bills. I haven't asked anyone for anything. I've never asked for anything. And I still... She pressed her hand to her mouth. I still ended up here. Adrian reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He set his phone on the table. I'm going to make one phone call, he said. There's a doctor I trust. He's going to come here, and he's going to make sure your ribs aren't cracked, and he's going to treat your face. You don't have to answer any questions you don't want to answer. You don't have to go anywhere you don't want to go. But I need you to let him look at you. She stared at the phone, then at him. Who are you? She said. He held her gaze. Someone who has the ability to make sure Victor Hale never laughs again, he said. The doctor arrived in 20 minutes. His name was Reeves. 60s, quiet, the kind of man who had long since learned that the people Adrian Moretti sent him to were not in a position for small talk. He examined Clara in the back booth with Patrice standing nearby at Clara's request, and Adrian sat at his own table and drank his coffee, now cold, and made another call. Dan, he said when it picked up, I need you at the Callaway Diner. It's 2:45 in the morning. Daniel Russo said, his voice carrying the blurred edge of someone pulled out of genuine sleep. I know what time it is. A pause. Rustling. This about Hale? Victor Hale specifically. Adrian kept his voice flat, measured. I need everything. Property records, complaint records, police report history, who he knows, and who knows him. Another pause longer. Adrian, Daniel said. What happened? Adrian looked across the diner at the back booth where Reeves was speaking quietly to Clara, and where Clara was nodding slowly, her hands still trembling. Someone happened to someone, he said. Start pulling. Daniel arrived at the diner in 40 minutes, which meant he'd gotten dressed and driven across town in the dark and hadn't stopped once. Which was the thing about Daniel, he complained constantly and showed up every time. He slid into Adrian's booth and dropped a folded piece of paper on the table. He'd printed something from his laptop before leaving. I started the pull from home, he said. This is what I got in the first 30 minutes. Adrian unfolded it. Names, addresses, dates. 3 building addresses on the east side of Bellwood. 2 complaint records with the City Housing Authority, both marked closed. A note at the bottom of the page, handwritten in Daniel's cramped script. 2 women. 1 moved out of state. 1 not traceable. Not traceable, Adrian said. She filed a complaint about Hale 8 months ago. Daniel's voice was carefully neutral, the way he got when he was angry enough to break something. 2 weeks later, the complaint was withdrawn. 3 weeks after that, no forwarding address, no activity on her utilities, nothing. Adrian folded the paper and put it in his pocket. How many buildings? That I've found so far, 11. Rental properties. All low income. All East Side. Daniel paused. The city assessor approved all 11 renovation permits in the last 4 years, which is unusual for that district. Fast turnarounds. 2 of them had violations dismissed the same week they were filed. Who at the assessor's office? I'm still pulling on that thread. Pull faster. Daniel looked across the diner at the back booth. Reeves had finished his examination and was speaking to Clara in low tones, writing something on a small card, handing it to her. She took it with both hands and held it like it was something more significant than a card. How bad? Daniel asked. 2 cracked ribs, contusions on her side and her back. The face you can see. Daniel was quiet. She reported it, he asked. She said she told him she was going to go to the police. And then. Daniel put his hands flat on the table. He had big hands, Daniel. The hands of someone who had worked with them for years before he'd started working for Adrian. There are ways to handle this that don't require us to... I know all the ways, Adrian said. I'm not interested in quiet. Daniel looked at him. That's new, he said. Careful. Not arguing. Just noting it. A lot of things are going to be new, I'm upset. Reeves came to the table when he was done. He didn't sit. 2 ribs, he confirmed for Adrian. Nothing displaced but painful. The contusions on her lower back suggest she was pushed against something with force. The laceration on her lip is minor. The eye will be fine in a week. He paused. She should be seen by someone proper. Hospital. She won't go, Adrian said. He'd already asked. No, Reeves agreed. She won't. She's afraid of the paperwork. He said it without judgment, the way a man says a thing he's seen many times and has made his peace with. I've given her something for the pain. She needs rest, and she needs to not be alone tonight. He left. Adrian went back to Clara's booth. She looked up at him. Reeves had cleaned up her face, the dried blood gone a small butterfly closure on her lip. She looked very young and very tired, and there was something in her expression now that hadn't been there when she walked in. Something careful, something measuring. She was reassessing the room she was in. I have a place, Adrian said. It's safe. There are people there who can make sure you're not bothered. He paused. You have a choice. I want you to know that. I'm not asking you to go anywhere. If you want to go home, I'll make sure you get there safely. If you want to stay somewhere else tonight, I have that option. My apartment, she said. He has a key. Adrian said nothing. A landlord with a key. Of course. I don't want to go back there tonight, she said. It cost her something to say it. He could see the pride it required to set down. I'm not ready to go back there. Then you don't have to. She looked at him for a long moment. I still don't know who you are, she said. My name is Adrian Moretti. He watched her process it. He watched the moment the name registered, the slight widening of her eyes, the small catch in her breath. He watched her recalibrate everything she'd just said in the last hour. Everything she'd told him. The way you recalibrate a conversation when you realize the stranger you've been talking to is not quite the kind of stranger you assumed. Oh, she said. Yes. And you're... She stopped. I'm a man who just heard what you told me about Victor Hale, he said. That's all you need to know tonight. She looked at the table, then at her hands, the trembling finally mostly gone now, just a residual flutter in the left one. Then she looked up at him again, and something had changed in her expression. Not trust, not quite that, would take time that neither of them had yet, but something adjacent to it. The decision to move toward a thing rather than away from it. Okay, she said.
John.
The house was 40 minutes outside of town, and Clara slept for most of the drive, which told Adrian more about how long she'd been running on nothing than anything she'd said. He watched her in the rearview mirror. She was in the back, his driver Marcus in the front, and the way her head dropped against the window, the way she startled twice at nothing, and then subsided told him she hadn't slept properly in days. The safe house was not a house anyone would call safe just by looking at it. It looked like a farmhouse from the road. It was, among other things, a farmhouse that had been reinforced in ways that didn't show from the road, and it had people in it who were paid to stay alert. Adrian had used it twice in the past decade for reasons that were different from this one. He found himself thinking about that as Marcus pulled up the long gravel drive. The woman who met them at the door was named Rosa, 60 years old, the build of someone who had raised several large children and survived it. She looked at Clara the way a woman looks at a girl she immediately wants to feed and put to sleep in a warm room, and that was why Adrian had called ahead and asked for her specifically. "Come on, sweetheart," Rosa said. "Let's get you somewhere comfortable." Clara looked at Adrian. "You're safe here," he said. She nodded, went inside. He stayed on the porch. Daniel had followed in his own car, and now he came up behind Adrian and stood next to him, the two of them watching the dark road, the quiet fields. "She recognized your name," Daniel said. "Everyone recognizes my name. I mean, she knew who you were and she didn't run." Adrian was quiet. "That's something," Daniel said. "What it is," Adrian said, "is a woman who was already so afraid that one more dangerous thing didn't register as the most dangerous thing in the room." He turned away from the road. "Don't romanticize it." "I'm not romanticizing it." Daniel followed him inside. "I'm saying she made a calculation, and the calculation was that you were a better bet than the alternative. Which tells you what the alternative looks like." Daniel had nothing to say to that. It was 4 a.m. when Adrian sat down with the files Daniel had brought spread across the kitchen table, while Rosa moved quietly in the background and the house settled into its night sounds. Property records, complaint logs, the names of the women who had filed and then gone silent, the names of city officials who had touched Hale's permits and complaints. A map of the East Side rental district with Hale's properties marked 11 of them, laid out like a web with Victor Hale at the center, and around him a network of small favors owed and silence purchased and problems made to disappear. Not just a predator, Daniel had said on the phone. A system. He was right. This was not a man who had done one terrible thing. This was a man who had built an architecture, who had looked at the structure of a small town, the way money moved through it, the way power moved through it, the way certain people's voices carried, and other people's voices got absorbed into the air before they reached anyone who mattered, and had used that structure deliberately. He'd found the gaps. The places where a woman with no savings and no connections and nowhere else to go was entirely dependent on one person's goodwill. He'd found those gaps, and he'd positioned himself inside them. Adrian had done something similar once. Not the same way. Not the same purpose. But the calculation, find the leverage, find the vulnerability, use, it was one he recognized. That recognition sat in his chest like something cold. He picked up his phone. "Tell me the name of the woman who withdrew her complaint 8 months ago," he said when Daniel answered from the next room. "Sandra Cowell, 28, worked at the East Side Laundry, filed the complaint on March 14th, withdrew it March 29th. Find her." "Adrian, if she went dark voluntarily." "Find her anyway, carefully. Tell her she doesn't owe me anything. Tell her I just want to know she's okay." He paused. "Tell her it's different now." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Is it?" he asked. Adrian looked at the map on the table. 11 properties. Who knew how many women? A network of protection built around one man's cruelty. "Yes," he said. Clara came downstairs at 7 a.m, moving carefully, one hand on the railing against the rib pane. Rosa had found her clothes, sweatpants, a soft shirt, and she'd showered, and the change was significant. Not in what had happened to her. That was still written all over her, the bruising. The careful way she held herself, the eyes that tracked the room before she committed to entering it. But something else was there too. Something had been cleaned along with the blood. Adrian was still at the table. She stopped in the kitchen doorway. "You've been up all night," she said. "I don't sleep much." She looked at the files on the table. He didn't move to cover them. "Is that about Victor?" she said. "Some of it." She came in slowly and sat across from him. Rosa appeared with coffee and bread and fruit, set it down without being asked, and disappeared again. "How many?" Clara said. She was looking at the map. He considered whether to show her, whether this was information she needed or information that would bury her further. He thought about what he'd said to Daniel. Don't romanticize it. He thought about what she'd said in the diner. "I've done everything right. At least 3 others that we know about so far," he said. "Probably more." She absorbed that. And no one did anything. No one in a position to do something chose to. "That's different," she said. "Yes." She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup, the same gesture as the soup last night, the same reaching for warmth. He said, "I was nothing." He said that's what people like me are. Nothing. Invisible. He said the town ran on people like him, and all I did was take up space that somebody more important could use. Her voice had gone controlled in a way that sounded like effort. "He said that to my face, like it was just a fact." Adrian said nothing. "And the worst part," she said, "the part I can't get out of my head, is that he was almost right. I've been invisible my whole life. Nobody at that housing office looked twice at my complaints. Nobody at the diner asked how I was doing when I started coming in with bruises. People look right through you when you're poor and young and alone, and they don't want to see it," Adrian said. "Because seeing it requires doing something about it." She looked at him. "You didn't look through me," she said. He met her eyes. "No." "Why not?" He thought about this. Honest answer, not the easy one. "Because I know what it looks like," he said, "when a system decides someone doesn't count. I've built systems. I know how they work. I know exactly where the weight lands." He paused. "I've never had someone use one against me, but I know what it looks like when they do." She held his gaze for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then she looked down at her coffee. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to take it apart," he said. "The whole thing. Victor Hale and every piece of cover he's built around himself." He said it the way he said most things, quiet, final, without needing agreement. "But I want to know one thing first." She waited. "Do you want justice?" he said, "or do you want to disappear?" The question hung in the kitchen. Rosa moved somewhere in another room. Morning light came through the window and lay across the table, across the files, across Clara's hands, still wrapped around the cup. "I want both," she said. Small voice. Honest. "You can't have both," he said. "Not entirely. Justice means visibility. It means your name attached to this. It means being the person who said it out loud." He paused. "I won't push you toward that if it's not what you want. I can make other arrangements. Hale will be handled. Your situation will be stabilized. Your name can stay out of it." She was quiet for a long time. "He told me nobody would believe me," she said finally. "He said it like it was obvious, like it was the most obvious thing in the world." She pressed her lips together. "I want to be believed." Adrian nodded. "Then we start there," he said. By 9 in the morning, the map on the table had 3 new marks on it. Daniel came back from wherever he'd been working the phones with a name. Greta Simmons, 31, former tenant of a Hale property on Mercer Street. She'd filed a complaint 14 months ago. The complaint had been received logged assigned to an investigator named Walters at the City Housing Authority, and then it had sat in Walters' queue, untouched, until Greta had eventually moved out, and the complaint had been administratively closed. "Walters," Adrian said. "Still with the city, 10 years. Daniel sat down and rubbed his jaw. "He's received campaign contributions from the Bellwood Business Foundation twice in the last 3 years. "And who chairs the Bellwood Business Foundation?" "You already know." "Say it anyway." Victor Hale. Adrian looked at the map, the web getting clearer with every thread they pulled. A city inspector here, a housing authority investigator there, a police sergeant who had received a complaint call from a Mercer Street address 14 months ago and had marked it no incident required without dispatching anyone. How high does it go? Clara asked. She'd been listening from across the table, tracking everything. We don't know yet, Daniel said. He looked at Adrian. Could be judges, could be council members, could be people I'm going to be very uncomfortable calling. Call them anyway, Adrian said. Adrian. Daniel leaned forward, lowered his voice, though they were alone in the room. I want to be clear about what you're asking for. This isn't a quiet resolution. If we pull all of this, if we take this to federal level, and it's going to need to be federal because the local system is clearly compromised, this is going to be a very large, very visible thing. Our names get near this. Our names get near a federal investigation. I know. And you're comfortable with that. Adrian looked at him. Dan, he said. Victor Hale beat a 26-year-old woman hard enough to crack her ribs because she was $100 short on rent. And 3 other women we know about went silent rather than fight him. And the entire system that should have protected them was being paid to look the other way. He paused. No, I'm not comfortable with it. I'm going to do it anyway. Daniel sat back. Okay, he said. Okay, Clara said from across the table quietly to herself. Like she was saying it to try it out. Like it was the first time in a long time that word had meant something. Boy. The first call to Victor Hale's office went unanswered, which was expected. The second one, which went to his personal cell, was answered on the second ring. Who is this? Not a question. The flat demand of a man who expected the world to announce itself before he deigned to respond. Adrian Moretti, Adrian said. A beat. I'm going to need to call you back, Hale said carefully. His voice shifting into a register that Adrian recognized immediately, the voice of a man recalculating, rearranging, buying himself seconds. No, you're not, Adrian said. You're going to listen to what I'm going to say in the next 90 seconds, and then you're going to sit with it, and then you're going to understand that the situation you believed you were in 24 hours ago is not the situation you're currently in. Silence. I have financial records, Adrian said. I have your communication records with employees of the Bellwood City Housing Authority. I have 2 women who are willing to speak about their experiences as tenants in your properties. I have a third whose complaint was closed before investigation and who I will be speaking to in the next 48 hours. I have the name of every official who touched those complaints and what they received from the Bellwood Business Foundation in the same fiscal year. The silence on the other end had a texture to it now, a held breath quality. You can send your lawyers to whoever you like, Adrian continued. You can make the calls you're about to make. I want you to know that I've anticipated them, and that I don't operate the way you're assuming I operate. I'm not asking for a quiet arrangement. I'm not asking to be paid. I'm not threatening your business. I am telling you that what you have built around yourself is finished. He paused. I wanted you to know before it became public because I wanted you to have the experience of knowing, of sitting with that. Another silence. Then finally, and Adrian had been waiting for. It had wondered which version of Victor Hale would emerge under pressure, the conciliator or the fighter arrived. You're making a significant mistake, Hale said. His voice had hardened. The recalculating was over. You think one woman's word. It's not one woman's word, Adrian said. I've made that clear. You think any of this is going to hold up when my legal team? Victor. Adrian let his name sit in the air for a moment. I've been in this town for 22 years. I've watched how you operate. The intimidation works on people who have nothing and are afraid of losing what little they have. I am not one of those people. You have nothing I want and nothing I fear. A pause. Understand the position you're in. He ended the call. Across the table, Daniel watched him. He'll make calls, Daniel said. Let him, Adrian said. Every call he makes is another person who now knows what we know. Every call is another thread. Daniel thought about that. That's either very smart, he said, or very... It's how it works, Adrian said. When guilty people panic, they create evidence. From the doorway, Clara stood with her coffee cup, and she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't immediately read. Not fear, not gratitude, something more complicated than either one. Something that had to do with watching a person operate in a world she'd always been told she had no access to. He's going to know it was me, she said. He'll know I'm the one who... He already knows, Adrian said. He's known since 2:30 this morning. He held her gaze. Does that change anything for you? She thought about it. Really thought about it, standing in the kitchen doorway with her cracked ribs and her bruised eye, and her coffee going cold. No, she said. Good. He looked back at the files on the table. Then we keep going, he said. Daniel came back at 11 with a name Adrian hadn't expected. Not a city official, not a lawyer, not anyone connected to the Bellwood Business Foundation or the Housing Authority, or the network of small corruptions they'd been mapping all morning. A cop, Sergeant Ray Dumas, Daniel said, dropping a folder on the table. 15 years on the force, assigned to the East Side District for the last 8. He sat down and pressed his hands flat on the table the way he did when he was containing something. He received 4 separate calls over the last 2 years. 4 different women, 4 different Hale properties, all calling in the same category of complaint. Harassment, intimidation, 1 filing a report of physical contact. He paused. All 4 were marked "No incident required." 2 of them were marked before a unit was dispatched. He canceled the dispatch himself. Adrian looked at the folder. Before, he said. Before anyone arrived on scene. He heard the address, heard the name of the property owner, and called it back. Daniel opened the folder and pointed to a printout. This is the dispatch log. You can see the timestamps. 8 minutes between the call coming in and the cancellation. Not enough time to assess anything. He made the call from his desk. Clara had been at the table for 2 hours now, reading everything they put in front of her, and she reached across and pulled the dispatch log closer. She read it slowly. Her jaw tightened. This woman, she said, pointing to a name on the log. Marie Tran. She called in October. I know her. She worked at the pharmacy on Mercer. She quit and left town in November. She looked up. She told me it was a family situation, that she needed to go back home. Did she seem like someone with a family situation? Daniel asked. Clara thought about it. Really thought. She seemed like someone who was scared, she said. She seemed like someone who had decided to stop being scared by leaving. Her voice flattened. I thought I understood that. I thought I might do the same thing eventually. She pushed the log back. I almost did. What stopped you? Daniel asked. She was quiet for a moment. I didn't have anywhere to go, she said. Plain. No self-pity in it, just the bare fact of it, which was somehow worse than self-pity would have been. Adrian looked at Dumas's name in the folder. Who does he report to? He said. Captain Ellen Marsh, East Side Precinct. Daniel's voice was careful. She's clean as far as I can find. 10 years in her position, no unusual financial activity, no connections to the business foundation. But she would have seen these reports crossing her desk. Or she should have. Should have, Adrian said. Maybe she didn't look closely. Maybe she trusted her sergeant's assessment. Maybe... Daniel stopped. Or maybe she did look and decided it wasn't worth the conversation. Find out which one, Adrian said. How exactly do you want me to... I don't care how. Find out. Daniel picked up his phone and walked to the other end of the kitchen. Clara watched him go, then turned back to Adrian. There are going to be more, aren't there? She said. Not a question. More names. More people who knew or should have known. Probably. And what happens when we find them all? What does that actually look like? Because I've been sitting here for 2 hours watching you pull threads, and I believe you when you say the web is there. I can see it. But I spent 3 months trying to tell myself the system would protect me if I just found the right person to talk to. I filed a complaint with the Housing Authority. I called the non-emergency line twice. She met his eyes. And then I stopped believing the system was going to do anything at all. You were right to stop believing it, Adrian said. The system here was compromised. That's not a failure of your instinct. That's a correct reading of the situation. So then what makes you different? He looked at her steadily. I don't operate inside the same system, he said. The protection Hale bought only works on people who play by the rules of that particular game. I don't play by those rules. Because you make your own. Because I have resources he can't neutralize through a city official and a canceled dispatch call. He paused. And because what I'm building right now isn't a local complaint. It's a federal case. The moment this crosses into federal jurisdiction, none of his Bellwood connections matter. She absorbed that. How long? She asked. Days, he said. Maybe less if the evidence is what I think it is. She was quiet. Then, he's going to know I'm here. He already suspects. I mean here, at this house. If he has the right connections. He doesn't have the kind of connections that reach this property, Adrian said. This is not a place that appears on any record connected to my name. We'll stay here as long as necessary. We, she said. You and me and Daniel and Rosa and 2 other people you haven't met yet, he said. You're not alone in this building. She looked down at her hands. The left one had stopped trembling entirely. The right one still had the faint remnant of last night's shaking in the knuckle, but even that was diminishing. I've been alone for a long time, she said. I'm not telling you that to make you feel sorry for me. I'm saying it because I keep waiting for the part where this stops feeling real. Does it still not feel real? She thought about it. It's starting to, she said. That's almost scarier. Daniel came back to the table with his phone in his hand and an expression on his face that Adrian recognized. The expression of a man who had found something he hadn't been looking for and wasn't sure what to do with it. Captain Marsh, he said. He sat down slowly. She filed an internal report 14 months ago. A complaint about Duma's handling of several East Side calls. Specifically, the October call from Marie Tran's address. He set the phone down. The report was received by the Internal Review Board. It was reviewed by the Deputy Chief of the East Side Precinct, a man named Harold Breen. He paused. Harold Breen received a grant from the Bellwood Business Foundation 3 months later. His daughter's private school tuition paid in full. The kitchen went very quiet. Marsh filed the report, Adrian said. And then nothing happened. She filed it. She did the right thing. And then she watched nothing happen and nobody say a word about it, and eventually she probably told herself she had tried and she had no more moves to make. Daniel's jaw worked. That's how it works. You make one move and the system absorbs it and keeps going, and eventually you have to decide how much of yourself you want to spend on something that isn't going anywhere. We need to talk to her, Adrian said. Captain Marsh. She filed the report. That means she has documentation. Her own documentation, not just what's in the system. People who file reports and don't trust the system keep copies. He stood up. She's a cop who watched a predator get protected by her own department. If she's the person I think she is, she's been waiting for someone to give her a reason. Adrian, Daniel said. Walking into a police precinct. Not the precinct. Then where? Find out where she has lunch, he said. Clara asked to come. She asked it simply without argument or persuasion behind it. Just a flat statement of intent, dressed as a request, and Adrian had looked at her for a long moment before answering. Your face is still bruised, he said. I know. Anyone who sees you is going to have questions. I know that too. This isn't... He stopped, reconsidered, because what he'd been about to say was, this isn't safe for you, and she'd already made the calculation about what safe meant to her and how much she was willing to trade for it, and he did not have the right to override that calculation. This is going to be uncomfortable, he said instead. Most of the last 3 months has been uncomfortable, she said. I'd like to start being uncomfortable in a direction that's going somewhere. Daniel made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Adrian looked at him. Don't, Adrian said. I didn't say anything, Daniel said, picking up his keys. Captain Ellen Marsh had lunch at a diner 3 miles from the precinct every Tuesday and Thursday, and today was Thursday. She came alone, sat in a booth by the window, with her back to the wall, the way cops always did, ordered coffee and a club sandwich, and unfolded a newspaper she wouldn't actually read, because the newspaper was something to do with her hands while she processed the morning. She was 52, compact gray, starting to show through dark hair she kept short and practical. She had the look of someone who had been tested repeatedly and had passed repeatedly and was tired of being tested. She looked up when Adrian and Daniel and Clara sat down across from her, and her face went through several expressions. Quickly surprise, then recognition, then a careful professional neutrality that she pulled around herself like armor. She looked at Clara's bruised face, then at Adrian, then back at Clara. "Ms. Bennett," she said. Clara went very still. "You know my name," Clara said. "You called our non-emergency line twice in the last 3 months, Marsh said. "I didn't know when I pulled the call logs 3 days ago that those calls had been flagged. I found out this morning." Something moved in her expression. "I want you to know that I only found out this morning." "What does flagged mean?" Clara asked. Marsh pressed her lips together. "It means that someone, and I now believe it was Sergeant Dumas, set a monitoring alert on your phone number in our system, so that any call you made would be routed to him directly rather than going through standard dispatch." She said it flat, the words clean and clinical, but something underneath them was not clean at all. "That's an illegal use of department resources. It's an illegal use of our monitoring systems. And it means every call you made for help was being intercepted by the person protecting the man you were trying to report." The silence at the table was absolute. Clara's face had gone white under the bruising. "Every call," she said. "Both times I called." "Both times. So he knew." Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "He knew I'd tried to report him. Victor knew." He would have been told yes. Adrian watched Clara process this. Watched her rebuild the timeline in her head every moment she'd thought she was making a safe, quiet move toward help someone had been watching and reporting back. Every moment she'd felt like maybe the system could still work for her. The system had been working against her. He watched her face go through something that was close to devastation, and then come out the other side of it into something harder and cleaner. "Captain Marsh," Clara said. Her voice had steadied. "You filed a report 14 months ago about Sergeant Dumas." Marsh didn't flinch. "I did." "And nothing happened." Deputy Chief Breen reviewed it and determined there was insufficient basis for disciplinary action. She said it the way you say something you have been forced to repeat many times and have not once believed. "I disagree with that determination. I have always disagreed with that determination." "Do you have a copy of the report?" Adrian said. She looked at him directly for the first time since they'd sat down. She'd been careful not avoidance, but professional calculation. The calculation of what looking at Adrian Moretti too directly might mean for her. But now she met his eyes, and what he saw there was not fear, and not the automatic defensiveness that most people showed him. What he saw was a woman trying to figure out whether she could trust the only available tool, which was a question he understood. "I have a copy," she said. "I've had a copy since the day I filed it, in a location that has nothing to do with the department." "I need it," he said. "I know you do." She was quiet for a moment. "I've been a cop for 26 years. I went into this work because I believed it meant something. I believed the rules meant something." She looked at Clara. "And then I watched a man use the department as a shield for a predator, and I made my report, and I watched it disappear, and I told myself I had to stay. That I was more useful inside than out. That I could find another way." She stopped. There are only so many times you can tell yourself that before you have to admit that you're just staying, because leaving feels like failure. "Leaving isn't what I'm asking for," Adrian said. "No," she said. "You're asking me to hand evidence to a man whose name is associated with things that would make most police captains run in the opposite direction." "Yes. And the argument for doing that is that the only thing standing between Victor Hale and another 3 months of this is the evidence in your copy of that report, combined with what I have and what I'm still building, he said. The local system is compromised at multiple points. A federal case doesn't have that problem. A federal prosecutor doesn't owe Victor Hale a school tuition or a canceled dispatch call. But they need documentation, and your report is the earliest documented evidence of systemic protection. Marsh looked at her untouched coffee. If I do this, she said slowly, I need something from you. Name it. Dumas gets prosecuted, not quietly transferred, not retired early with his pension intact, prosecuted. She looked at Adrian with something that had been compressed for 14 months and was just now finding room to expand. He sat at his desk and he canceled dispatch calls from women who were being hurt. He used department systems to spy on a victim's phone. He is the reason Marie Tran left this town and Sandra Cowell disappeared. I want him to answer for that in front of a judge. I have no control over what a federal prosecutor decides to charge, Adrian said. But the evidence I give them will make it very clear what he did and what it cost. She nodded, once, firm. I'll have the report to you by tonight, she said. She picked up her coffee and finally took a sip, and Adrian could see in the way her shoulders settled slightly that 14 months of holding something alone had just been distributed, and the weight for the first time was shared. They were back in the car when Clara said, She knew my name before we walked in. Yes, Adrian said. She'd pulled my call logs 3 days ago, before any of this, before you got involved. Clara turned to look out the window. Why, what made her pull them 3 days ago? Adrian was quiet. You talked to her, Clara said. Not accusing, just arriving at it. Before last night, you already knew something about Hale before I walked into that diner. He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. Dan, she said. He told you something before I walked in. You said you couldn't sleep. You said you were thinking about something. Daniel in the front seat glanced at the rearview mirror. He told me about the property complaints, Adrian said. 3 days ago, not in detail, not with names. Just there was a pattern he'd noticed in the East Side district. Complaints that went nowhere. Women in rental properties who filed and then went quiet. He paused. I was already thinking about it when you walked in. So you weren't just in that diner by coincidence. I was in that diner because I couldn't sleep, he said. That part was true. He looked at her. I didn't know who you were. I didn't know you would walk through that door. But I'd been sitting with what Daniel had told me and trying to decide what to do about it, and then you walked in, and I had my answer. She absorbed that. You'd already decided to do something, she said, before you knew it was me specifically. Yes. She was quiet for a long moment. Why? She said. You have an empire. You have power and money and influence and a reputation that makes people cross the street. Why does Victor Hale and a pattern of East Side complaints matter to you? He looked out his own window, the town moving past them, the streets he'd been walking for 22 years. Because I built something in this town, he said. I built it by understanding where the pressure points were, where the leverage was, where people were vulnerable. He paused. And for a long time I told myself that what I did was different because I wasn't targeting people who had nothing. I wasn't using poverty as a weapon. I was operating in a different world entirely. He stopped. Victor Hale is what it looks like when someone decides that the most vulnerable people in a town are the safest targets. He built his version of what I built, except he aimed it straight down at people who couldn't fight back. Another pause. I don't get to keep living in this town and telling myself I'm different if I watch that happen and do nothing. Clara looked at him for a long moment. That's honest, she said. I try to be when it matters. Do you think that makes you a good person? He almost smiled. Almost. No, he said. I think it makes me a person who made a specific choice in a specific moment. Whether that adds up to good is a longer conversation. She nodded slowly, like the answer had satisfied her in the way that honest, unsatisfying answers sometimes do. Peg. Sandra Cowell was in a city 200 miles away, and she had been there for 8 months, and she had not unpacked. Not metaphorically, literally. Her apartment had boxes along 2 walls and a sleeping bag on the mattress, and 3 items in the kitchen cabinet, because she had told herself every week for 8 months that this was temporary, that she was going to go back, that the reason she hadn't gone back yet was timing and not terror, and if she kept telling herself that long enough, she would eventually believe it. Daniel found her through a mutual contact carefully the way he'd been asked. He made the call himself without Adrian in the room because he had a face and a voice that inspired less immediate alarm than Adrian's name. He explained who he was and what he was building, and that her name had come up not because she was in any trouble but because she was proof of something important, and her proof mattered. She said she'd have to think about it. She called back in 40 minutes. "You have other women," she said. It wasn't a question. "You have other names." "We have Clara Bennett," Daniel said, "and we believe we'll have Greta Simmons. We're working on Marie Tran." "Marie is with her sister in Oregon," Sandra said. Her voice was flat, careful. "She told me when she left. We both lived in the Mercer Street building at the same time. We looked out for each other. Would she talk to us?" Silence. "She's scared," Sandra said. "She's been scared since the day she filed that complaint and nothing happened, and then suddenly Dumas was knocking on her door wanting to know what she'd told people." "Dumas came to her personally," Daniel said very still. "He came to both of us. He told us he said he was following up on the complaint. He was very professional about it, very polite. He never said anything threatening. But he made sure we knew that Victor Hale was a well-respected member of the community and that unsubstantiated complaints could have legal consequences for the person filing them." Her voice dropped. "And then he said he hoped we understood that his department had limited resources and had to prioritize cases with the strongest evidentiary support." Daniel wrote this down. "He threatened you," he said, without saying a single threatening word. "That's how it works," Sandra said. "That's exactly how it works. You can't point to one thing he said. But when he left, I felt like I'd been told very clearly what would happen if I kept going. So I stopped." "Sandra." Daniel kept his voice steady. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to know that your answer doesn't change anything about what we're doing or what we're going to try to do for you. It's just important for the case. Okay? Before you withdrew the complaint, did Victor Hale contact you directly?" A long silence. "He came to my apartment," she said. "He had a key. He let himself in." Daniel said nothing. "He came in and he sat down across from me and he said he was sorry we'd gotten off to a difficult start. He said he was a reasonable man and he believed in working things out between people before they involved outside parties. He said he understood I'd been having some financial trouble and that he was a flexible person when it came to long-term tenants who demonstrated good faith." She stopped. "And I sat there, and I knew exactly what he was saying. And I knew that Dumas had come, and that nothing was going to happen, and that the complaint was going nowhere, and that the only thing standing between me and homelessness was whether I cooperated with this man's version of flexibility." "What did you do?" Daniel asked. "I withdrew the complaint the next day," she said. "And I started sleeping with my door barricaded and saving every dollar I could. And the minute I had enough for first and last somewhere else, I packed what I could carry, and I left." Her voice finally broke just slightly, just at the edges. "I keep thinking about the women who came after me. The ones who moved into my apartment after I left. I keep thinking about them." "We're going to stop that," Daniel said. "We are going to stop it, and we are going to make sure that what was done to you is part of the record." "Will it matter?" "Yes," he said. "I promise you it will matter." Another silence. "Okay," she said, small, careful, like a word she was testing the weight of. "Tell me what you need." By 4 in the afternoon, the kitchen table at the safe house looked like the war room it had become. 3 laptops open, printed files in organized stacks, A timeline on paper handwritten spanning 14 months of documented inaction. Phone numbers. Names. The shape of something that had once been invisible, made suddenly unavoidably visible. Captain Marsh's report arrived by secure transfer at 4:17, and Adrian read through it in less than 20 minutes, and then read it again slower. It was thorough. Marsh had done the work. Every incident, every dispatch log, every case number where Dumas had canceled or closed or marked no incident required. She'd cross-referenced them against property records, against Hale's tenant list, against known complaint filings at the housing authority. She'd built the same web they were building 14 months ago and submitted it up through a chain that had simply absorbed it. She knew everything, Clara said, reading over his shoulder. 14 months ago, she knew all of this. She knew what she could document within the department, Adrian said. She didn't have the financial records. She didn't have the business foundation connection to Breen. She didn't have Sandra or Marie. She had the pattern, but without the full picture, a federal prosecutor would have called it insufficient. And now, he set the report down and looked at the table. Now, he said, we have the full picture. Daniel came back in from the front room, his phone in his hand, and an expression that was the closest thing to excitement Adrian had seen on his face in years. I found a name, Daniel said. Someone who worked in Hale's management company for 3 years. She left 6 months ago. She told a mutual contact she left because she saw things she couldn't live with, and she's been trying to figure out who to tell that she could trust. He looked at Adrian. She has records, internal records, emails, maintenance logs that were fake to justify entry into tenant apartments when Hale didn't have a legal reason to be there. Financial transactions between Hale's company and individuals she recognized as city employees. The room was very still. She kept them, Adrian said. She kept copies of everything, Daniel said. She said she kept them because she told herself somebody would eventually come looking. Clara made a sound small and fractured. Adrian turned, and she was standing with her hand over her mouth and her eyes full, and she was shaking her head slowly, not in disbelief, but in something else entirely. Something that looked like grief and wonder at the same time. There were people who knew, she said. Her voice was muffled behind her hand. There were people this whole time who knew and were scared and just waiting. Yes, Adrian said. All this time, I felt like I was screaming into nothing. Like there was just air, and nobody could hear me. They heard you, he said. Some of them heard you. They were just as trapped as you were. She dropped her hand from her mouth. She pressed it to her side instead against the ribs, a gesture so habitual she probably didn't know she was doing it anymore. How many people has he done this to? She asked. How many women went through what I went through because the system handed them directly back to him? We don't know yet, he said, but we're going to find out, every single one. She nodded, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, straightened. What do we do with all of this? She said. What's the next step? Tonight, he said, I make a call to a federal prosecutor I trust. Tomorrow we compile everything into a formal presentation. The prosecutor's office takes it from there. He paused. It takes time after that. Indictment, arraignment, potentially a trial. This doesn't end in a week. I know, she said. I'm not looking for fast. I'm looking for real. Daniel was watching her with an expression he didn't bother to conceal, something that was frankly admiring, and he said, For what it's worth, I've worked with Adrian for 12 years. I've seen a lot of people in a lot of difficult positions, and I think you might be the most composed person I've seen in the middle of something like this. Clara looked at him. I'm not composed, she said. I've been terrified for 3 months. Being terrified in a direction that's actually going somewhere feels almost exactly the same from the inside. Bad. Adrian made the call at 5. The federal prosecutor's name was Nathan Cole, and he and Adrian had a history that was not comfortable on either side, but was built on a specific kind of mutual respect that made collaboration possible when their interests aligned. Cole was 50, meticulous, the kind of man who believed the law was the most powerful tool available and spent every working hour making sure he never gave anyone a reason to disagree. "Moretti," he said when he picked up, without warmth but without hostility either. The tone of a man answering a call he'd been half expecting. "I have a case for you," Adrian said. "I have plenty of cases. Not like this one." Adrian paused. Victor Hale, Bellwood. Systematic abuse of tenants in low-income rental properties. Documented obstruction at the City Housing Authority. Documented complicity from a police sergeant. Documented interference with internal affairs. Review at the departmental level. And a management company employee with records that establish a pattern going back at least 4 years. A long silence. "You've been busy," Cole said. "Since 2:30 this morning. Hale is respected in this town." "Hale is protected in this town," Adrian said. "Those aren't the same thing. The protection is what I'm handing you." Another silence, the working kind, the kind where someone is running calculations. "I'm going to need everything," Cole said. "Everything you have. Clean documentation, verifiable sources, nothing that came through channels I can't cite. Captain Ellen Marsh at the East Side Precinct has a 14-month-old internal report that your office never received. She'll hand it to you directly. The management company employee has maintained copies of internal records for 6 months in anticipation of exactly this kind of contact. And I have 2 women who are prepared to give testimony." He paused. "And possibly a third." "The victims," Cole said, not coldly, carefully. "Are they represented?" Adrian looked at Clara across the table. "Not yet," he said. "But they will be. They need to be," Cole said. "Before I talk to them or anyone from my office talks to them, I want them protected, and I want them represented, and I want it clean." A pause. "This is going to be a significant case, Adrian. If it goes where you're saying it goes, officials involved, departmental complicity, this is going to be a very public, very loud case. Your name isn't going to stay out of it." "I know. And you're comfortable with that." "I made a choice this morning," Adrian said. "I'm living with it." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Send me what you have," he said. "Tonight. I'll have my team on it in the morning." He ended the call. Adrian set his phone on the table. Clara was looking at him across the mess of files and timelines and names, all of it building towards something that had not existed at 2:30 that morning when she'd pushed through a diner door and almost fallen on the floor. "Is it real?" she asked. "It's real," he said. "Nathan Cole is a federal prosecutor. One of the best in the state. And he's going to take the case. He's going to look at what we send him tonight, and he's going to take the case," Adrian said. "Yes." She put both palms flat on the table and looked at them. Then she looked up. "I need to call someone," she said. "I need to call someone, and I don't actually have anyone to call. I don't have anyone who would understand why this is." She stopped, laughed just slightly, just a breath of it. "I was going to say I don't have anyone to celebrate with, but that's not quite the right word." "No," he said. "Relief," she said. "I need someone to feel this relief with." He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at Daniel, who was already looking at him with one eyebrow slightly raised. "Rosa makes dinner at 6, Adrian said. "All of us. Tonight." Daniel's other eyebrow joined the first. "We're staying for dinner," Daniel said flatly. "We're staying for dinner," Adrian confirmed. Rosa, from the kitchen doorway, where she had apparently been listening for some time, said, "I already started." At the dinner table at 6:30, with food and the particular exhausted warmth of people who have worked very hard together toward something difficult, Clara said, "I keep thinking about the women I don't know yet, the ones we haven't found." Daniel put down his fork. "We'll find them," he said. "The prosecutor's office will find them. I know. But right now, tonight, they don't know any of this is happening. They don't know someone is building this case. They're wherever they are, doing whatever they do to get through the day, believing what I believed 3 days ago, that nobody is coming and that nothing is going to change." She shook her head. "I want them to know. I want someone to tell them." "Someone will," Adrian said. "When the time comes." She looked at him. "Will you let me be the one who does?" she said. "When it's time, when the case is built and there's something real to tell them, will you let me be the one who reaches out?" He held her gaze across the table. "Yes," he said. She nodded, picked up her fork. Outside, the evening was settling over the fields and the road and the town 40 minutes away, where Victor Hale was sitting in his house. Whatever house a man like Victor Hale sat in at the end of a day like this, with the phone calls he was making, and the lawyers he was activating, and the people he was reaching out to for reassurance that he was still protected. He didn't know yet that the call to Nathan Cole had been made. He didn't know that Sandra Cowell had said yes from a city 200 miles away, surrounded by unpacked boxes, for the first time feeling like the boxes might be worth unpacking. He didn't know that a woman named Ellen Marsh had finished her club sandwich alone at a window booth and driven home and opened a drawer and taken out the copy of a report she had been carrying for 14 months, and that she was holding it now with both hands like it was something she'd thought she might carry forever. Victor Hale didn't know any of it, but Clara Bennett did. And for the first time in 3 months, she slept. She slept for 11 hours. Clara woke up disoriented, which she expected, and in pain, which she also expected, and for 3 full seconds, she didn't know where she was. Then the ceiling came into focus, and the smell of the room clean, unfamiliar. The particular quiet of a house that had real walls and real distance between it and the rest of the world settled her back into the fact of where she was and why. She lay still for a moment and ran through everything the way she'd been doing for 3 months, the mental accounting that had become automatic. What she had, what she owed, what could be taken. Except now the accounting looked different. Now there were new items in it. Nathan Cole, Sandra Cowell saying yes in a city 200 miles away, Ellen Marsh holding a report for 14 months and finally releasing it. The management company employee with boxes of records she'd kept because she'd believed someone would eventually come. Clara pressed her hand to her ribs and breathed through the ache and thought someone came. She was downstairs by 8, and the safe house had already shifted into a different gear. Daniel was at the table with both laptops open, talking in a low voice into his phone. Rosa handed Clara coffee without being asked, and Adrian was standing at the kitchen counter with the secure transfer documents from Marsh spread in front of him and a pen in his hand, reading and marking the way a man reads something he is going to have to defend line by line in front of someone who will test every single one. He glanced up when she came in. "Good morning," he said. "You slept," she said. It wasn't a question. His jacket was gone, and his shirt was different from yesterday, a detail she noticed the way you notice things when you've spent 3 months reading small signals for safety information. "A few hours," he said. "Cole's team?" she asked, nodding at the documents. "Cole's lead investigator called at 6. They want a preliminary meeting today." He set the pen down. "I need you to agree to something before we go any further." She held her coffee and waited. "You need a lawyer," he said. "Your own, not someone I hired and not someone Cole's office provides. Someone who is there specifically for you, whose only obligation is to you." He held her gaze. "This case is going to move fast now that Cole has it. You're going to be asked questions by people who are very skilled at getting answers, and some of those questions are going to be hard, and you need someone in that room who is looking out for exactly one person." "I can't afford—" "I know," he said before she could finish. "That's been handled." She looked at him. "I'm not taking your charity," she said. Flat, not angry, just clear. "It's not charity," he said. "It's a resource allocation in service of a case that I am personally invested in seeing through. The lawyer's fees come out of my pocket, and your obligation to me is 0. He paused. "You can pay me back if it makes you feel better. After, when the case is settled and you're on whatever ground you build next." She was quiet for a moment. "You've thought about what happens after," she said. "I think about outcomes," he said. "It's how I operate. And what's the outcome for me in your thinking?" He picked up his pen, looked at it, set it down again. Someone who went through what you went through, who had the clarity to walk into a diner at 2:30 in the morning instead of collapsing somewhere alone, who sat at this table yesterday for 6 hours, reading evidence files and asking the right questions and getting harder instead of smaller. He paused. I don't know exactly what the outcome looks like, but I know it isn't the life Victor Hale was trying to confine you to. Clara looked at her coffee cup, then at the documents on the counter, then at Adrian. Okay, she said. I'll take the lawyer. Good. He picked up the pen. Her name is Joanna Pierce. She's in the city. She'll be here by 10. Clara blinked. You already called her. I called her at 7. Before you asked me. He met her eyes without apology. I arranged the option. You still had to choose it. From across the room, Daniel said without looking up from his laptop. That's his version of asking first. Adrian gave him a look. Daniel kept typing. Joanna Pierce arrived at 9:50, which was 10 minutes early, which told Clara something about her before she said a word. She was 43 tall with the kind of focused energy that filled a room without being loud about it. She shook Clara's hand first, before she acknowledged Adrian or Daniel, and then she pulled out a chair and sat down across from Clara specifically and said, Tell me what happened. In your own words. Start wherever you want. Clara told her. She told her all of it, the $100 shortage, the first conversation with Hale the weeks that followed the complaints she'd filed that had gone nowhere. The calls to the non-emergency line the night that sent her through the diner door. She talked for 40 minutes, and Joanna Pierce listened to every word and wrote nothing down, which was the first thing that surprised her. And when Clara finished, Joanna sat for a moment, and then said, How many people knew what was happening to you before last night? What? Before you walked into that diner, how many people in your life knew what Hale was doing? Clara thought about it. My coworker at the diner noticed she asked once if I was okay. I told her I was having landlord trouble. That's it? That's it. Why? Joanna asked, gentle but direct. Clara pressed her lips together. Because he told me nobody would believe me. And because... She stopped. Because I believed him. Not the part about nobody believing me. I didn't believe him completely. But I believed enough of it. I believed that saying it out loud would cost me more than staying silent. That calculation, Joanna said, is one I've heard from almost every client who has been through something like this. And I want to tell you something important. That calculation is not a weakness. It is a completely rational response to an environment that has been designed to make silence the safest option. She leaned forward slightly. But we are going to spend the next weeks building a case that demonstrates exactly how that environment was designed, and who designed it, and what it cost you and the other women. And for that to work, I need you to be willing to be very specific, very detailed, and very public. She held Clara's gaze. Can you do that? Yes, Clara said. It's going to be harder than you think, Joanna said. Not because you're not capable, but because there will be moments when Hale's lawyers try to make the story about you, about your financial situation, about your choices, about whether a woman with your background and your circumstances is a credible... I know, Clara said. Sharp, then softer. I know. He already practiced that argument on me. Directly. She paused. I want to hear it again in a courtroom so I can watch it fail. Joanna Pierce looked at her for a moment. Then she smiled, just slightly, just enough. Good, she said. That's exactly the right attitude. Cole's investigator was a woman named Reyes, 35, and built like someone who had run long distances for years and was comfortable with discomfort. She arrived at 11 with a colleague and 2 large document bags, and she sat up at one end of the table and went through everything Adrian and Daniel had compiled with the focused speed of someone who does this for a living and has long since stopped being surprised by what people do to each other. She paused twice, once at the dispatch log with Dumas's timestamps. She set it aside in a separate pile without comment, which was how Adrian knew it was significant. and once at the financial transfer records from the management company employee whose name they now knew was Tina Graves. She read through 3 pages of those records and then looked up at Adrian and said, "How many transactions?" 47 over 4 years, he said, ranging from $200 to $12,000. Reyes looked back at the documents. To the same recipients. 7 different recipients, Daniel said. 3 City Housing Authority employees, including the supervisor who closed the complaint filings, 1 police department administrator, 1 city council aide, and 2 payments to an LLC that was created 18 months ago and dissolved 14 months ago, whose registered agent is a name I haven't been able to connect to anyone yet. Reyes looked at the LLC information. "I can connect it," she said quietly. She took a photograph of the page with her phone. "This LLC is associated with 3 other cases my office has been building for 2 years. She said it calmly, the professional calmness of someone delivering information that is not calm at all. Hale is not operating alone. He never was. This is part of a larger network of property owners in 4 counties who have been running the same scheme in multiple markets. The kitchen went absolutely still. Daniel said slowly, 4 counties. We became aware of the network 8 months ago, Reyes said. We've been building toward an entry point. A case strong enough to use as leverage for the larger investigation. She looked at Adrian, then at Clara. This is the entry point. Clara sat very still. How many women? She said. Reyes looked at her with careful professional steadiness. Our current estimate is between 40 and 60 across the 4 counties, over a 5-year period. Clara made no sound, but something moved through her, something visible from the outside, even when she was holding everything still. Her jaw, the slight tightening of it. Her hands flat on the table. Her breath one slow, deliberate pull. 40 to 60, she said. At minimum, Reyes said. Those are the cases we can document. There are almost certainly others. And Victor Hale is the entry point, Clara said. Meaning if this case goes the way you need it to go, you use it to open the rest. Correct. So what happened to me? She stopped. Started again. What he did to me is connected to what was done to women in 4 counties over 5 years. Yes. Clara looked down at her hands. Then she looked up. Tell me what you need, she said. Whatever you need, tell me. The meeting ran 4 hours. By the end of it, the table was covered in organized evidence packages. Copies of everything. Chain of custody documented. Joanna Pierce sitting at Clara's right hand through every question Reyes asked, occasionally stopping the questioning to confer quietly with Clara before letting her answer, which was exactly what she was there to do. At 2 in the afternoon, Reyes and her colleague packed up the document bags. We'll have a formal interview scheduled through Ms. Pierce's office, Reyes said to Clara. Probably within the week. Between now and then, I'm going to recommend that you not return to your apartment. She knows that, Adrian said. I'm saying it officially, Reyes said. She looked at Adrian directly. And I'm going to say something else officially. The investigation from this point forward is a federal matter. I understand the role you've played in getting us to this point, and Cole's office appreciates the documentation. But going forward, Mr. Moretti, I need you to let us handle the direct interactions with Hale and with Hale's network. That wasn't my plan anyway, he said. I know what your reputation suggests your plan might be. My plan, he said, was always to hand this to someone with federal jurisdiction. That's why I called Cole last night instead of doing anything else. Reyes studied him. Okay, she said. Then we understand each other. She left. Joanna Pierce closed her notebook and looked at Clara. You did well, she said. Really, you were clear, you were consistent, and when she pushed on the timeline, you held the detail exactly right. That matters. It happened, Clara said. It's not hard to remember something that happened. You'd be surprised, Joanna said. Trauma does complicated things to memory. The fact that yours is intact and linear is significant. She paused. How are you feeling? Like I've been through a 4-hour interrogation, Clara said. That's accurate. Go rest. I mean it. She looked at Adrian. She needs to rest and eat something real. Rosa, Adrian said. Already started. Rosa called from the kitchen. Victor Hale made his first public move at 3:15 in the afternoon. His lawyer issued a statement through a local PR firm that Adrian got a copy of via text from a contact at the Bellwood Courier 20 minutes after it was distributed. He read it once quickly and then put the phone on the table where Clara and Daniel could see it. The statement was 4 paragraphs. The first paragraph described Victor Hale as a longtime Bellwood business leader and a significant contributor to the East Side Economic Development Initiative. The second paragraph stated that Mr. Hale had become aware of certain unfounded allegations circulating in connection with his property management business and wished to address them directly. The third paragraph said that any suggestion of impropriety in his management practices was categorically false, that his properties were consistently maintained in compliance with all applicable codes and regulations, and that his record of service to the Bellwood community spoke for itself. The fourth paragraph was the one that made Daniel's jaw tighten and made Joanna Pierce, who had not yet left, pull out her notebook again. It said, Mr. Hale has reason to believe that these allegations originate with individuals who have a documented history of financial delinquency and have associated themselves with known criminal elements in an apparent attempt to avoid legitimate debt obligations. He intends to pursue all available legal remedies against those responsible for the dissemination of false information. Clara read it twice. Known criminal elements, she said. He means me, Adrian said. He's saying I made this up because I owe him money and I'm using you to intimidate him. Yes. He's calling me a liar in public. Yes. She set the phone down on the table. Her face was completely still, which Adrian had learned in the last 18 hours meant she was not calm at all, but was choosing very carefully what to do with what she was feeling. Can he do that? She said, looking at Joanna. He can issue a statement, Joanna said. What he's doing is called a preemptive narrative. He's trying to control the story before the story gets told. She clicked her pen. The documented history of financial delinquency comment is going to be interesting for his lawyers to defend once the case becomes public and the reason for that delinquency is on record. She looked at Adrian. The known criminal elements line is more complicated. My name isn't in it, Adrian said. It doesn't have to be. If his lawyers are smart, and they will be, they'll argue that any investigation that originated with information provided by you is tainted by your personal interests. She paused. Which is why the chain of documentation matters. Every piece of evidence in that case went from a verifiable, identifiable source directly to Reyes. Your role was connection, not collection. That's a meaningful distinction. Will a jury see it that way? Clara asked. A jury won't hear your name in connection with Adrian Moretti's, Joanna said. That's my job. Daniel was looking at the statement on the phone. He put this out 4 hours after Adrian called Cole, he said. He knew the call had been made. How? Clara said. Adrian picked up the phone and looked at the statement again. Cole's office has a leak, Daniel said, not accusatory. Flat the way he said things when he was several steps ahead of the emotion of them. Somebody in that office made a call within 4 hours of Moretti contacting Cole, and Victor Hale's PR team had this ready by 3 o'clock. That's a significant problem, Joanna said. It's a solvable problem, Adrian said. Cole needs to know before this goes any further. He picked up his phone and dialed. Cole answered on the second ring. Your office has a leak, Adrian said. A pause. Explain. Hale issued a public statement at 3:15 this afternoon referencing the investigation. The statement went to his PR firm before it could have been prepared without advance notice of your involvement. You called this in at 6 last night, and by 9 this morning, your lead investigator was at my location. Somewhere in that window, someone made a call. A longer pause. The kind that means something is happening on the other end that the listener isn't showing. I'll handle it internally, Cole said. I know you will. I also know that whoever made the call now knows what Hale knows, which means Hale knows the shape of the evidence and will spend the next 72 hours trying to neutralize what he can. He can't neutralize federal evidence collection. He can pressure witnesses, Adrian said. The women who have agreed to come forward. Sandra Cowell is 200 miles away but not invisible. Tina Graves still lives in this area. I'll have both of them contacted through proper channels tonight with information on protective options. Cole's voice had sharpened to something focused and hard. And I'll tell you something else. If Hale knows what we have, it confirms the network extends into this office, which is a separate crime, and one that I take considerably more personally. A pause. This is bigger than I thought last night. It always was, Adrian said. I just needed you to see it. He ended the call and looked at the table. At Daniel, at Joanna, at Clara. He'll move to protect the witnesses, he said, and he'll move to find the leak. And Hale will move to shut down whatever he can shut down before the indictment, Daniel said. How long until indictment? Clara asked, looking at Joanna. Depends on how fast Cole can move, Joanna said. With what Reyes took today, and what Cole is building on his end days, maybe less if there's a flight risk argument. If Hale's network is in 4 counties and he has resources, Cole will argue he can disappear. He won't disappear, Adrian said. Something in his voice made the room pause. You sound very certain of that, Joanna said carefully. Victor Hale has spent 30 years building a public identity in this town, Adrian said. He needs that identity the way some people need air, the businessman, the philanthropist, the foundation chair, the man everyone respects. He paused. He is not going to run. Running is an admission, and admission is the one thing his personality cannot survive. He looked at Joanna. He's going to fight, publicly, loudly. He's going to try to make this a story about me and about Clara's credibility and about what it looks like when a criminal with a grudge weaponizes a vulnerable woman. He already started, Daniel said, nodding at the statement. That statement is nothing, Adrian said. That's the opening move of someone who still believes he can win publicly, which means he doesn't yet understand what we gave Cole's office today. When he understands, Daniel said slowly, what does that look like? It looks like a man who suddenly has nothing left to lose, Adrian said, which is the most dangerous version of Victor Hale. Clara said nothing, but she stood up from the table and walked to the window and stood there looking out at the fields. Her arms crossed over her chest, her hand resting on her ribs. Adrian watched her back. The particular set of her shoulders that he'd been reading for 18 hours. The tension that had been there when she walked into the diner that had been softening in increments since that had now gone taut again. Clara, he said. She turned. He can't reach you here, he said. I know, she said. I know that. It's not... She stopped. It's not me I'm thinking about right now. Sandra, he said. Sandra, Tina, Marie. All the names we don't have yet. She looked at him. If he knows the investigation is coming, and he knows who the witnesses are, Cole is moving tonight, he said. Tonight might not be fast enough, she said. It'll be fast enough, he said. And then because she needed more than his confidence, Reyes knew about this network before today. She's been building toward it for 8 months. She is not going to let 2 days of preparation become the thing that loses this case. She's too good, and she's been waiting too long. Clara held his gaze. Promise me, she said. He didn't promise easily. She'd been around him long enough in 20 hours to know that. He measured things before he said them, and he didn't say things he wasn't certain of. I promise you, he said, that I will do everything in my power to make sure those women are protected, and that my power in this town is not nothing. She nodded, turned back to the window. Okay, she said. The call came at 7 that evening, not from Cole, not from Reyes, not from anyone Adrian had expected. It came to Daniel's number, which was the number that appeared on the card Adrian had left at a specific location 2 weeks before any of this happened. A contact point he maintained for exactly the category of situation where someone needed to reach him without being able to reach him directly. Daniel answered it and listened for 45 seconds and then said, "Hold on," and walked to where Adrian was sitting and held out the phone. "You need to take this," he said. Adrian took it. "This is Moretti," he said. The voice on the other end was a man's voice, middle-aged, careful. Someone who was choosing his words like someone who was afraid of them. "My name is Gerald Finn," the voice said. "I'm a deputy city attorney for Bellwood. I've been employed in that capacity for 11 years. A pause, the kind packed with something being decided. "I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you is something I should have said 2 years ago and didn't, and that I am aware of what that cost." "Go ahead," Adrian said. "Victor Hale came to my office 2 years ago," Finn said. "He had a complaint that had been filed against him by a tenant. He wanted the complaint rerouted. He explained that he had existing relationships with certain people in the housing authority and the police department, and he described those relationships in enough detail that I understood immediately that they were not theoretical." Another pause. "And he asked me to ensure that any legal filings connected to his properties that came through the city attorney's office were flagged to his attention before they were processed." Adrian was very still. "And you agreed?" he said. "I told him I would consider his request. I never explicitly agreed. I also never explicitly refused." Finn's voice was tight with something shame-fear, the particular discomfort of a man describing his own cowardice. "And then I went back to my office and I thought about my career and my pension, and the fact that my wife had just been diagnosed with a significant illness, and I told myself it was a gray area, that I hadn't agreed to anything, that I was just keeping my options open." "How many filings did you flag?" Silence. 3, Finn said. "Over 18 months. 3 filings that should have proceeded through normal channels were delayed long enough for Hale to be notified and to take action." He stopped. "One of them was from a woman named Clara Bennett." The air in the room seemed to change temperature. Adrian looked across the kitchen at Clara, who was sitting at the table with Rosa, a cup of tea in her hands, not yet knowing what she was hearing. "Why are you calling now?" Adrian said. His voice was level, not warm, controlled in the way that very precise emotions are controlled. "Because he called me this afternoon," Finn said. "After the statement went out. He called to remind me of our arrangement and to tell me that things were going to get complicated and that I should be prepared to provide information about the city attorney's involvement if I was ever questioned." A pause. "He wasn't asking. He was telling me what I was going to do." "And that was the thing that finally broke it," Adrian said. "I have a wife who is fighting for her life," Finn said, voice cracking at the edges. "I have 2 daughters, and I told myself for 2 years that I was protecting them by staying quiet, and tonight I listened to Victor Hale tell me what I was going to do, and I realized that the thing I was actually protecting was him." A long, ragged exhale. "I'm going to lose my job. I'm probably going to be disbarred. I might face criminal charges." "Yes," Adrian said. "Probably all 3. I know." A pause. "But I have the records. Everything. I kept everything. Every delay notification, every contact from Hale's office, every date and timestamp. I kept it because I told myself someday I might need it, and I suppose I was right." He stopped. "Will Cole take it?" "Call his office tonight," Adrian said. "Tell the duty clerk that this is in connection with the Hale investigation and that you have documentation. They'll take the call." "And you," Finn said. "Will you?" "What you did caused harm," Adrian said. "I'm not going to tell you otherwise. One of the filings you delayed belonged to a woman who spent 3 months alone with no protection because the things she tried to do to protect herself were rerouted to her abuser." He paused. "But what you're doing now also matters. And the records you kept, those records, are going to matter to a lot of people." He paused again. "Call Cole's office." He handed the phone back to Daniel. Daniel looked at him. "The city attorney's office," he said quietly. He had the city attorney's office. "He had pieces of everything," Adrian said. That's what 20 years of buying protection looks like. You don't need the whole system. You just need enough pieces in the right places. Until you don't, Daniel said. Until someone makes a call at 7 in the evening because they're more afraid of the man they've been protecting than they are of losing their job. Adrian looked at Clara across the room. She was looking back at him. She'd seen the change in his expression during the call, read that something had shifted, and she was waiting with the patience of someone who had learned that waiting was a skill. He walked to the table and sat down across from her. "What happened?" she said. "Someone else called," he said. "A deputy city attorney. He's been flagging your filings to Hale for 2 years." She absorbed this. "My filings," she said, "including yours. He delayed them long enough for Hale to be notified." She was very quiet. "So when I filed the complaint with the housing authority," she said slowly, "Hale already knew about it before anyone looked at it." "Yes." "He knew every move I made." "Yes." She set her teacup down, slowly, precisely, like she needed to do something with her hands that required care so that her hands didn't do something else. "He had everything," she said. "He had the police. He had the housing authority. He had the city attorney's office. He had—" She stopped. "He had built a cage, an actual cage, around every exit." "Yes," Adrian said, "and I walked around inside it for 3 months wondering why every door I tried was locked." "Yes." She looked at the table, a long moment, then she looked up. "And now," she said, "tell me now." "He called the deputy city attorney this afternoon to remind him to cooperate," Adrian said. "The call scared Finn into doing the opposite. He has documentation of every contact, every delay, every date. He's calling Cole's office tonight." Something moved across Clara's face. It wasn't triumph exactly. It was more complex than triumph. It was the expression of someone watching a structure they'd been trapped inside begin to come apart at the seams from its own weight. "He overreached," she said. "He thought he was reminding people who they worked for," Adrian said. "Instead, he reminded them what they'd done." "There's a difference," she said. "Yes," he said. "There is." It was 9 in the evening when Adrian's phone rang, and the name on the screen was Cole. He picked up immediately. "We have Hale's location," Cole said. "He hasn't run. He's at his residence with 2 lawyers and what appears to be a document disposal team." Adrian was on his feet before Cole finished the sentence. "He's destroying evidence," he said. "He's attempting to," Cole said. "We have a warrant. My team is moving in 20 minutes. A pause, and in the pause was something that sounded slightly like satisfaction, and Cole was not a man who let satisfaction be audible often. "We also identified the leak in my office, a paralegal with a personal connection to one of Hale's network contacts. She's been suspended and a full review is underway." "The witnesses," Adrian said. "Protected. Reyes moved both Cowell and Graves this afternoon. They're in secure locations with marshals. I also have someone with Tina Graves personally. And Marie Tran in Oregon. We made contact an hour ago through her sister. She wants to cooperate." Cole paused again. She specifically asked if Clara Bennett was part of this. Adrian looked at Clara, who was watching him from across the kitchen with her hands around her tea and her eyes steady. "She is," he said. "Tell her," Cole said, "that Marie Tran said she was sorry she left without saying goodbye." Adrian lowered the phone. "Marie Tran wants to cooperate," he said. "Cole's team has her in Oregon." He paused. "She said she was sorry she left without saying goodbye." Clara pressed her lips together, exhaled slowly through her nose. "She doesn't have anything to be sorry for," she said. Her voice was thick, just slightly. "She doesn't have anything to be sorry for at all." "I know," he said. "You can tell her that yourself." He put the phone back to his ear. "Cole," he said, "when you go in tonight, the document disposal team." "We'll be interrupted," Cole said. "Whatever they've touched in the last 4 hours, our forensic team will reconstruct. Digital deletion is rarely as complete as people hope." He paused. "Go home, Moretti. I mean that in the collegial sense. This is ours now. I know, he said. You did something today that I didn't expect from you, Cole said. The words were precise, considered. Cole didn't say things he didn't mean. What's that? Adrian said. You handed it over, Cole said. You built the case and you gave it to the right people, and you didn't try to finish it yourself. A pause. In my experience, men like you don't do that. Men like me, Adrian said. Men who are used to handling things personally, Cole said. Men who have the resources to handle things personally and the habit of doing so. Adrian was quiet for a moment. I want it to hold, he said. Anything I do personally doesn't hold in court. Anything you do does. That's a practical answer, Cole said. That's the only answer, Adrian said. He ended the call and set the phone down and looked at the kitchen and the people in it. Daniel, who had been with him for 12 years and was watching him with the kind of quiet attention he reserved for moments he was going to remember. Rosa, who was refilling Clara's tea without being asked. Joanna Pierce, who had stayed hours past what she needed to and was sitting at the end of the table with her notebook closed, just present. And Clara, who was looking at him the way she'd looked at him in the diner in those first 3 seconds after he'd said, "You're safe now," when she was trying to figure out if the thing in front of her was real. Cole is moving on Hale tonight, he said. The evidence collection, a warrant. He paused. It's happening. Daniel let out a breath. Tonight, Clara said. Tonight, he confirmed. She set her teacup down, straightened in her chair. The movement was small, but it meant something, the posture of someone who has been braced against something for so long that they've forgotten what it feels like to not brace, and who is very slowly, very carefully beginning to remember. What do we do? She said. We wait, he said. I've been waiting for 3 months, she said. I know, he said. This kind is different. She thought about that. Because something is actually happening on the other side of it, she said. Yes. She picked up her tea, looked at the steam coming off it. Then she said quietly, almost to herself, I called that non-emergency line twice, and both times he already knew. He always knew. Every move I made, every complaint I filed, every door I tried, he was already there. She paused. And then I walked into a diner at 2:30 in the morning with nowhere left to go, and somehow that was the one move he hadn't planned for. You couldn't have planned it either, Adrian said. No, she agreed. I was just out of options. I was just done being afraid of the next thing. She met his eyes. Sometimes that's enough. He held her gaze. Sometimes, he said, that's everything. From somewhere in the house, Rosa had turned on a radio very low, and the sound of it moved through the walls like company. Outside the fields, and the dark and the road that led back to Bellwood, and the house where Victor Hale was sitting with his lawyers and his document disposal team, believing until 20 minutes ago that he still had enough pieces of the machine in place to survive this. He didn't know yet what the night was going to bring. But in the kitchen of the safe house, Clara Bennett was still awake. And she was done being the one who didn't know what was coming. The call came at 11:47. Adrian was still at the kitchen table when his phone lit up with Cole's number, and he picked it up before the second ring. We have him, Cole said. 3 words, flat, precise, delivered with the particular economy of a man who has been working toward something for long enough that the arrival of it doesn't require decoration. Adrian said nothing for a moment. Across the table, Daniel looked up from his laptop. Clara, who had been sitting on the couch with Joanna Pierce, going through what to expect in the formal interview, went very still. Any resistance? Adrian asked. His lawyers tried, Cole said. They had a motion ready. Apparently they'd been drafting it since this afternoon, arguing that the investigation was tainted by the involvement of, and I'm quoting, a known organized crime figure with a documented history of evidence manipulation. A pause. The judge looked at the motion for approximately 90 seconds and denied it. Then she signed the warrant expansion. The document disposal team interrupted mid-process. Forensics has the shredder contents, the hard drives, and 3 boxes of materials his team was preparing to move off-site. Cole's voice carried something beneath its professional surface, not triumph, something steadier than that, the quiet satisfaction of a case that has found its footing. We also found something we weren't looking for. Adrian waited. A second set of books, Cole said. Physical ledgers. Hale kept physical ledgers. In a fireproof safe behind a painting, which is either very old-fashioned or very paranoid, and in this case turned out to be very useful for us. A pause. The ledgers document every payment made to every individual in his network going back 9 years. Names, amounts, dates, services rendered. It's a complete accounting of exactly who he owned, and for how much, and for what. Daniel, who had been watching Adrian's face, read the conversation, mouthed what Adrian held up one finger. Wait. 9 years, he said. 9 years, Cole confirmed. The network is larger than Reyes estimated yesterday. We're looking at connections in 6 counties now, not 4, and at least 2 state-level officials whose names appear in the ledger. He paused. I'm going to be very busy for the next few months. The women, Adrian said. Every name in the ledger that corresponds to a tenant complaint is going to be tracked. Every single one. Cole's voice was firm. I'm assigning a separate team specifically to victim identification and outreach. They start tomorrow morning. A pause. Clara Bennett's name is in that ledger, Adrian. Her complaint, her filing, the date Finn delayed it, the payment made to Finn for that specific delay. It's all documented in Hale's own hand. Adrian looked at Clara. She was watching him with those steady dark eyes, her hands folded in her lap, her face holding that particular patience that had less to do with calm and more to do with a woman who had learned to endure the space between things. I'm going to tell her, he said. Tell her one more thing, Cole said. Tell her that when this goes to trial, and it will go to trial, Hale is not going to plead his ego won't allow it. Her testimony is going to be the first one the jury hears. Not because it's the most legally significant, because it's the one that makes every other piece of evidence make sense. He paused. She's the one who walked through the door. Adrian ended the call. The kitchen was quiet. Daniel had closed his laptop. Rosa stood in the doorway. Joanna had her pen in her hand, but wasn't writing. They have him, Adrian said. Clara's breath left her in a single slow exhale, like something that had been held so long the body had forgotten it was holding it. The arrest, she said. Not a question. Tonight, at his residence. Adrian came to the table and sat across from her. There were physical ledgers, a second set of books he kept personally, 9 years of payments, every name, every amount, every arrangement. He paused. Your name is in it, your complaint. The payment to Finn to delay your filing, his handwriting. Clara looked at the table. His handwriting, she said. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. He wrote it down, she said. He was so certain he would never be caught that he wrote it all down. People who build systems like his get comfortable, Adrian said. Comfort makes them careless. Or arrogant, Joanna said from the end of the table. She was already writing. Legally, a physical ledger in his own hand is extraordinarily significant. His lawyers are going to argue duress, coercion, misidentification. They'll argue everything they can. But handwritten records are very hard to explain away. Clara nodded slowly. Then she looked at Adrian. What else? She said. There's something else. I can see it. He held her gaze. Cole said your testimony will be the first one the jury hears. Something moved across her face that she didn't try to control. Not fear, not quite. Something more complicated than fear, the expression of a person confronting the full size of what they walked into when they pushed through a diner door at 2:30 in the morning and discovering that the size of it was larger than they'd understood. First, she said. First. She pressed her lips together, looked at Joanna. That's... She stopped. That's very public. Yes, Joanna said. Everyone in town? Everyone, Joanna said. And possibly beyond. If this connects to state officials in 6 counties, this is going to be a significant news story. Clara was quiet. He said nobody would believe me, she said finally. He did, Adrian said. He said it in this town. He said it like it was geography, like it was just a feature of the landscape. She shook her head slowly. And now the first voice the jury is going to hear is mine. Yes, Adrian said. She looked up at the ceiling, exhaled. Okay, she said. Okay. Daniel said carefully. You don't have to decide anything tonight. I know, she said. I'm not deciding. I decided 3 months ago when I started making those calls and filing those complaints. I decided when I walked into that diner. She looked at him. I'm just taking a moment to understand what I decided. Take as many moments as you need, he said. She nodded, looked at Adrian. Thank you, she said. He met her eyes. Don't thank me yet, he said. We're a long way from done. I know, she said. I'm thanking you for right now. For tonight. She paused. I went to sleep last night not knowing if any of this was real. I woke up this morning and it was still real. And now it's almost midnight and Victor Hale is being arrested and his ledgers are in federal custody, and I'm sitting in a kitchen with a federal prosecutor and a lawyer who is actually mine. Her voice had gone soft but not weak, the softness of someone who has been wrung out completely and is finally putting something down. 3 days ago I was alone. I want you to know that I know the difference. Adrian said nothing, but something in his face changed. Not softened exactly because Adrian Moretti didn't soften easily, but opened slightly the way a door opens when someone finally uses the right key. And he held her gaze for a long moment before he looked away. Victor Hale was formally charged at 12:32 in the morning. Daniel got the alert on his phone and read it aloud at the table. Extortion, coercion, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, conspiracy to deprive civil rights. 6 counts on the first charge sheet alone, with a notation that additional charges were anticipated as the investigation expanded. Joanna wrote down each count with a precise hand. Clara listened with her eyes closed. When Daniel finished reading, she opened her eyes and said, "Conspiracy to deprive civil rights." "It means the systematic nature of what he did," Joanna said. "It means the prosecutor is arguing this wasn't just individual acts. It was a designed system that deprived you and the other women of rights you were legally entitled to." "A designed system," Clara said. "That's what the ledgers prove. That's what the network of officials proves. Not a man who lost control in a moment. A man who built a machine." Clara absorbed that. "He said I was nothing," she said. "And then he built an entire machine to make sure nothing is what I stayed." She shook her head. "That's a lot of work to put in for someone who's nothing." Daniel made the sound again, the almost laugh he kept suppressing. This time, Adrian didn't look at him. Sandra Cowell called at 1 in the morning, which meant it was 2 in the morning where she was, and which meant she had been awake waiting for exactly this news. Clara took the call in the living room away from the table, and Adrian stayed in the kitchen and did not listen. But he could hear the tone of it. 2 women's voices close to tears, not speaking the way strangers speak, but the way people speak, who have been through the same specific experience and have found each other on the other side of it, which has its own language entirely. When Clara came back, her eyes were red. "She's been sleeping on the floor," Clara said. "She has a bed. She couldn't sleep in it. She said it felt too exposed. So every night she pulled the blankets off and slept on the floor against the wall because she said she needed to feel something solid at her back." She pressed her hand to her mouth briefly, then lowered it. "She said tonight was the first night she thought she might be able to sleep in the bed." Nobody said anything. "I didn't know," Clara said. "When I moved into that building, I didn't know she'd been there. I didn't know what had happened to her, and she didn't know about me. We were in the same building living through the same thing, and we never talked because we were both too scared and too ashamed and too—" She stopped. "He isolated us. That's how it worked. He made sure we each felt alone, so none of us would compare notes." "That's textbook," Joanna said quietly. "Isolation is the first tool. It's always the first tool. Well, Clara said, it didn't work. She sat back down at the table. What happens to Sandra now? She asked. Practically. She withdrew her complaint. She moved away. She's been living in a city she didn't choose out of a bag she never fully unpacked. With her testimony and the ledger documentation, she becomes a protected federal witness, Joanna said. Cole's office will support her through the process. She can go home if she wants to. She said she doesn't know where home is anymore, Clara said. She said she doesn't know if Bellwood is home or if it's just the place she ran from. That takes time, Joanna said gently. I know. Clara was quiet. I told her she could decide later, that right now the only thing she had to do was know she didn't have to be afraid. She paused. She cried. She said nobody had told her that in 8 months. The kitchen held that sentence. Rosa had long since stopped pretending to do anything in the background and was simply sitting at the far end of the counter listening. Her hands folded her face, doing the things faces do when they are hearing something true. Adrian said, You're good with her. Clara looked at him. I've been her, she said simply. Tina Graves called at 2. This call was different. Tina was 38 and had worked in Hale's property management company for 3 years, which meant she had watched from the inside. Which meant she had known exactly what was happening, and had not been a victim in the same direct way, but had carried the knowledge of it for 3 years like a stone in her chest, and the weight of that was its own kind of damage. She didn't ask for Clara. She asked for Adrian. He took the call outside, standing on the porch in the night air, and Tina Graves said before he could speak, I want you to know that I kept those records because I thought maybe someday someone would care enough to come and ask for them. And every month that went by when nobody came, I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just holding on to paper that didn't matter. She paused. And then your associate called, and I want you to know that when I hung up that phone, I sat on my kitchen floor and I cried for about 45 minutes. Why, he asked, not unkindly. He wanted the specific reason. Because I was right, she said. Because the thing I'd been telling myself for 3 years, that it mattered, that it was worth keeping, that someone would eventually care, was actually true, and I'd stopped believing it. Her voice broke just briefly, and she gathered it back. You spend enough time being wrong about hope, and you stop hoping. And then when it turns out you were right all along, She searched for the word. It's disorienting. I know, he said. Do you? She said. Not challenging, genuinely asking. He was quiet for a moment. I spent 22 years in this town believing certain things were the way they were, he said. That power moved in specific directions. That the people without it stayed without it. That the system was the system, and you either worked inside it or around it, but you didn't change it. He looked at the dark fields. 3 days ago, a young woman walked through a diner door, and I chose to do something different from everything I'd always done. And I don't know yet if it was the right choice for my particular situation. But I know it was the right choice. A pause. She's brave, Tina said. Clara, I've never met her, but she's brave. She's stubborn, he said. I think she'd want you to call it stubborn. Tina almost laughed. Almost. Tell her thank you, she said. Tell her from me. Tell her yourself, he said. When this is done. He came back inside at 2:30 and found Clara asleep on the couch, a blanket pulled over her that Rosa had put there. Her hands curled under her chin, her breathing deep and even. She'd been awake for nearly 24 hours. Her body had simply made the decision without consulting her. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Daniel came up beside him and looked at her too, and said quietly, She's going to be okay. I know, Adrian said. You sure? I know what people look like when they're going to be okay, he said. They look like that. Like someone who found a way to sleep even when the floor is still shaking. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, the trial is going to take a long time. Yes. Months. Maybe longer. She's going to have to live inside this for months. I know, Adrian said. She knows too, and you're going to be connected to this case, Daniel said. Carefully. Not as an accusation, not as a warning, just as a man who had been watching Adrian for 12 years, laying the truth down where it could be seen. Your name, the way this started. Cole is already thinking about how to structure the narrative, and your involvement is going to come up. I know. Your business interests, Daniel said. Some of the people who currently have agreements with us who operate under certain understandings, they're going to be uncomfortable with a federal case with your name adjacent to it. I know, Adrian said for the third time. Daniel looked at him sideways. And? Adrian looked at Clara sleeping on the couch. And nothing, he said. I know. Daniel accepted that. He'd always been good at accepting things Adrian had already decided. I'll start working on the contingency structures in the morning, Daniel said. Tomorrow, Adrian agreed. The morning came in quietly. Clara woke at 7 again, which seemed to be the hour her body had chosen, and she came into the kitchen already more alert than she'd been any morning since she arrived, which told Adrian that the news of the arrest had done something to her sleep that rest alone couldn't have done. She poured her own coffee this time without waiting for Rosa, and she sat down at the table where the file stacks had been organized overnight into neat packages for Cole's office, and she said, "Tell me what I'm supposed to do today." Joanna wants to go over the formal interview questions, he said. For how long? As long as it takes. She nodded, wrapped her hands around the cup. And then we eat lunch, he said. And we see what Cole needs. She almost smiled. It was a near thing, just the edge of it, the beginning of an expression that the last 3 months had made her careful about. You make it sound very ordinary, she said. Some of it is very ordinary, he said. Even the extraordinary things are made of ordinary days. She looked at him over her cup. That's almost philosophical, she said. Don't tell anyone, he said. She did smile then, small, careful, real. Your secret is safe, she said. Daniel walked in from the front room and dropped his phone on the table and said without preamble, Hail made bail. The smile left Clara's face. The kitchen stopped. How? Adrian said. Flat. One word. His lawyers filed at 6 this morning. The judge set bail at $2 million. He posted in under an hour. Daniel's jaw was tight. He has conditions. Ankle monitor. Surrender of passport. Can't contact any named witnesses or their associates. He paused. He's out. Clara had gone very still. He's out, she said. He can't come near you, Daniel said immediately. The protective order covers this address. Does he know this address? No, Adrian said. Does he know I'm still in Bellwood? He knows you're somewhere. He doesn't know where. She pressed both palms flat on the table, looked at them. He's out, she said again. It's temporary, Joanna said from the doorway. She had stayed the night in a guest room rather than drive back to the city, which said something about her read of the situation. Bail doesn't change the charges. It doesn't change the evidence. It doesn't change the ledger or the witnesses or anything Cole built last night. It just means he sleeps in his own house while we prepare for trial. He sleeps in his own house, Clara said. I can't go to mine. I know, Joanna said. That's not fair. I'm not going to pretend it's fair. It's not about fair, Clara said. Her voice had gone flat in that way it went flat when she was compressing something large into a manageable shape. I know it's not about fair. I stopped expecting fair. She exhaled. I want to understand the rules. I want to know what the rules actually are so I can work inside them. The rule right now is that he's out and you stay here until the trial, Joanna said. The rule after that is that whatever happens in that courtroom is documented, public, and permanent. Clara looked up. Permanent, she said. A federal trial conviction is not something money makes disappear, Joanna said. Not even his money. Clara held that thought. Then she stood up, picked up her coffee, looked at Adrian. How long until trial? She said. Months, he said. 6 at the earliest. possibly 12. She nodded, processing it. "I need a job," she said. Nobody had expected that. "What?" Daniel said. "I can't stay in this house for 6 months doing nothing while the case builds," she said. "I need to work. I need money that's mine. I need a routine that's mine." She looked at Adrian. "I'm not saying I don't appreciate this. I'm saying I can't wait for 6 months. It'll break something in me that I can't afford to break." He looked at her steadily. "What kind of work?" he said. "I'm a waitress," she said. "And I'm apparently a woman who reads federal evidence files for hours and asks the right questions. Whatever that's worth, I don't know." She paused. "But I need to be building something. I can't just be surviving while I wait." "Joanna," Adrian said. "I'll make calls," Joanna said. "There are options, jobs that understand the situation that can work around interview requirements." She paused. "Clara, I also want to talk to you today about something separate." "What?" "There are legal aid organizations," Joanna said. "In this state. Organizations that represent people in exactly your situation. They always need people. People who know the system from the inside, who understand what it's like to file a complaint, and have it go nowhere, who can sit across from a woman who is terrified and say, 'I know what this is because I lived it.'" She paused. "They aren't lawyer positions. They're advocate positions. They're not high-paying, but they're exactly what you just described, something you build while you wait." Clara looked at her for a long moment. "I'm not qualified," she said. "You are more qualified than most of the people who walk in to apply," Joanna said. Clara sat down slowly. "Let me think about it," she said. "Take the morning," Joanna said. "Tell me at lunch." Cole called at 10 with a development that landed in the kitchen like something dropped from a height. "Theodore Park," Cole said. "State Senator. 3rd District. His name is in the ledger 9 times over 4 years. The payments were routed through the business foundation as charitable donations, but the notations in Hale's ledger are specific. What Park provided in exchange." A pause. "Park sits on the State Housing Oversight Committee, the committee that reviews city-level housing authority complaint procedures." Adrian said nothing. "He has been in that position for 4 years, Cole said. During which time the committee conducted 3 reviews of East Side Housing Authority complaint handling. All 3 reviews found no deficiencies." He paused. "Because the committee chair was being paid by the man the complaints were about." "A state senator," Adrian said. "This is going to become a much bigger story than Bellwood," Cole said. "I need you to be ready for that." "Ready in what sense?" "Ready for the attention that comes when a state senator is indicted in connection with a case that began with your involvement." Cole's voice was measured. "I'm not asking you to do anything differently. I'm just flagging it." "Flag noted," Adrian said. He ended the call and looked at Daniel. "A state senator," Daniel said. He'd heard enough of the call to follow. "Theodore Park." Daniel said nothing for a moment. Then, "His chief of staff did 3 fundraisers in Bellwood last cycle." "I know. You contributed to 2 of them." "I know that too." "Adrian?" Daniel leaned forward. "Your name in connection with a state senator who is being indicted for participating in a network that harmed vulnerable women." "My name," Adrian said, "is in connection with the case that exposed it. That distinction matters." "In a courtroom, yes. In the press." "In the press?" Adrian said, "We let Joanna and Cole handle it." "And in the town," Daniel said. "In Bellwood. The people who have known your name for 22 years, and what your name has meant when they read that you handed a state senator's corruption to a federal prosecutor. What does that do to your business?" Adrian was quiet. He thought about this. Honestly. Not the way he would have thought about it 3 days ago when the calculation would have been purely strategic. But now, with Clara in the next room talking to Joanna about legal aid organizations, with Sandra Cowell in a city 200 miles away, maybe sleeping in her bed for the first time in 8 months with Tina Graves and her 45 minutes on the kitchen floor, and the boxes of records she'd kept for 3 years, because she'd believed someone would come. "I don't know," he said. Daniel blinked. In 12 years, he had almost never heard Adrian say that. "You don't know," Daniel said. "The business will be what it is," Adrian said. "Some people will pull back, some won't. Some will look at what I did and see weakness. Some will look at it and see something else." He paused. "I can't control that. I've spent 22 years controlling everything I could, and the things I couldn't control I avoided. This is a thing I can't control, and I chose to step into it anyway." "Why?" Daniel asked. Not rhetorically, genuinely. Adrian looked towards the living room, where Clara's voice could be faintly heard talking to Joanna. "Because she walked into a diner at 2:30 in the morning with cracked ribs and a split lip and said, 'I can't bear this pain anymore,' and every single person who should have made sure she never got to that point had failed her." He paused. "I've built 22 years on the idea that I was different from the people I worked beside, that I had a code, that there were things I wouldn't do and lines I wouldn't cross." He looked at Daniel. "If I walk past a woman at 2:30 in the morning and let her collapse and drive home to not sleep, then I was never different from anyone. I was just someone who had never been tested on the specific thing that mattered." Daniel was quiet for a long time. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay," Adrian agreed. The press came to Bellwood at noon. Not in force yet, just 2 reporters from the state capitol who had picked up the arrest notice and the initial charge sheet and had driven down following the state senator angle because a state senator connected to an extortion network was a story that sold itself. They were outside the Bellwood courthouse talking to anyone who would talk. Daniel monitored it from the safe house and gave reports every 30 minutes. Clara sat with Joanna through most of the morning and then emerged at 1 in the afternoon and said, "I'll do it." "The advocate position," Joanna said. "Yes." She sat down. "Call whoever you need to call. Tell them I'm available." She paused. "Tell them I'm not available to be anyone's symbol. I'm available to do the work." "Understood," Joanna said. "And one more thing," Clara said. She looked at Adrian. "Cole said my testimony is first, that it makes everything else make sense." She held his gaze. "I want to make a statement before the trial, a public one. Not through lawyers not managed. Me, my name, my face." She paused. "He called me nothing, and he said nobody would believe me, and he said it in this town. I want to say my name in this town." Adrian looked at Joanna. "Timing matters," Joanna said. "We have to be careful not to prejudice the jury pool." "After the indictment," Adrian said. "Once the charges are formally filed and the case is public record." "How long until that?" Clara asked. "If Cole moves at the speed he's currently moving," Adrian said, 2 weeks, maybe less." 2 weeks, Clara said. "I can wait 2 weeks." Victor Hale called Adrian's personal number at 3 in the afternoon. The number that Hale had was a contact line from years past when they had moved in overlapping circles in the way that powerful men in a small town inevitably did. Adrian looked at the name on the screen for 1 full ring before he answered. "Victor," he said, "I want you to understand something." Hale's voice was not the voice of a man who had been arrested and bailed out in the same night. It was controlled, deliberate, the voice of a man who had made his calculations and arrived at a specific conclusion. "What you think you've built against me is not what you think it is. The ledger is in federal custody," Adrian said. "Documents can be interpreted in many ways," Hale said. "My lawyers are very good at interpretation." "Your lawyers are good at a lot of things," Adrian said. "They're not good at explaining 9 years of handwritten records that document payments to 7 public officials in exchange for specific services." Silence. "You made a mistake," Hale said. "I understand why you did it. The girl walked into your path and you made a decision in the moment. I understand those decisions. I've made them myself." His voice shifted not softer, but angled the way a man angles a weapon. "But you have a business in this town. You have relationships. You have arrangements that have worked for 22 years and that work because everyone involved understands the rules. The moment my case becomes fully public, Those arrangements come under scrutiny. They cannot survive. I know, Adrian said. A pause. Hale hadn't expected that. You know, he said. I made the calculation, Adrian said. I decided the arrangements were less important than what you built with your free hand while everyone was looking at mine. You're throwing away 22 years of Victor. Adrian's voice didn't rise, didn't harden, just clarified the way water clarifies when the sediment settles. I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to hear it clearly. Not because I owe it to you. Because I want you to spend whatever time you have left before this trial understanding it. He paused. You picked people who had nothing. You built your whole system on the specific vulnerability of people who could not fight back. And the reason you did that is because somewhere under the money and the suits and the foundation galas, you knew that you could not survive in a fair fight. So you made sure there were no fair fights. Another pause. You told Clara Bennett that nobody would believe her. You said it like it was permanent, like it was a fact of the world. His voice went quiet. She is going to be the first voice a federal jury hears, and every word she says is going to be documented in your own handwriting. So I want you to think about that. About what fair looks like when the playing field has finally been leveled. Hale said nothing. Don't call this number again, Adrian said. He ended the call. He set the phone face down on the table. Daniel was looking at him from across the room. He's scared, Daniel said. He should be, Adrian said. Clara came in from the hallway. She had heard the tone of it, if not the words, and she stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and looked at Adrian. Was that him? She said. Yes. What did he want? To make me understand what I was giving up by not walking away, Adrian said. And I told him what he was walking toward, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. You're not afraid of him, she said. No, he said. You really aren't, she said, more to herself than to him. I spent 3 months being afraid of one phone call, one knock on the door, one name on an email. I lived inside that fear like it was a house I couldn't leave. She shook her head slowly. And you talked to him like he was just a man. He is just a man, Adrian said. He always was. He just made sure you never got close enough to see it. Clara absorbed that. I think that might be the most useful thing you've said to me in 3 days, she said. And you've said a lot of useful things. He almost smiled. Almost. The indictment came at 4:45. Cole's office issued a press statement at 4:47. 17 counts. Victor Hale Gerald, Finn Ray Dumas, Harold Breen, Theodore Park, and 4 other names from the ledger. The charges ranged from extortion and obstruction to civil rights violations and public corruption. The statement used the word systematic 4 times, which was deliberate, and which Joanna pointed out, meant Cole was building the argument that this was not a collection of individual crimes, but a designed enterprise. Daniel read the full indictment aloud at the kitchen table. Clara listened with her eyes open, which was different from how she'd listened to the arrest news last night. She didn't close her eyes. She watched Daniel's face as he read, and she tracked every count, and she nodded at each name Finn Dumas Breen, like she was taking attendance. Like she was making sure every single person who had touched her case and turned away from it was going to have to answer for the turning. When Daniel finished, she said, 17 counts. Yes, Joanna said. Against 9 defendants. Yes. From one woman who was $100 short on rent, she said. Nobody said anything. She looked at the table, then at the window, then at Adrian. He said I was nothing, she said, for the last time, the final time, as if she was saying it now specifically to retire it to say it once more in the daylight, so it could be seen for what it was, and then put down for good. He said it like it was obvious. She looked at the indictment in Daniel's hand. 17 counts, she said again. 9 defendants. She paused. That's a lot of work for nothing. And then Clara Bennett, who had walked into a roadside diner at 2:30 in the morning with cracked ribs and a split lip and nothing left to lose, laughed. It was short and rough, and it cracked in the middle, and there were tears in it. And it was the most genuine sound Adrian had heard in the safe house in 3 days, and it filled the kitchen, the way real things fill rooms completely without apology. With the particular force of something that has been compressed for a very long time, finally finding the space it needed. Daniel laughed too, startled into it. Rosa pressed her hand to her heart. Joanna wrote something in her notebook and didn't try to hide the fact that she was smiling. Adrian looked at Clara laughing at the kitchen table with tears on her face, and the indictment of the man who had told her she was nothing. Sitting in the room like proof, and he thought about 22 years in a town, and the specific weight of the choices that built them, and whether any of those choices had ever felt in the moment they were made as exactly right as this one did right now. They hadn't. None of them had. The 2 weeks before Clara's public statement were the longest of her life, and she had lived through some long stretches. Not because nothing was happening. Everything was happening. Cole's office was moving at a speed that his lead investigator Reyes described as unprecedented for a case this size, which meant the evidence was so clean and so comprehensive that the normal friction points simply weren't there. The ledger alone had generated 43 separate investigative threads. The document disposal team that Hale had hired proved to have made the classic mistake of people who believe digital deletion is total. 4 of the hard drives had been incompletely wiped, and forensic recovery had produced 11,000 additional documents that were now being cataloged by a team of 6 specialists working in rotating shifts. Daniel reported all of this to Adrian, who reported the relevant portions to Clara, who absorbed it with the focused attention of someone who had learned to treat information as a form of safety. But the waiting was hard. She was at the safe house. She was safe. She had Joanna checking in twice a day, and she had Rosa and she had Daniel appearing at the table every morning with fresh printouts and the particular energy of a man who was genuinely enjoying the work of dismantling something that deserved to be dismantled. She had the phone calls with Sandra, which had become Daily Sandra, who had finally unpacked 3 boxes and reported this as if it were a military victory, which Clara told her it was. What she didn't have was the thing she'd told Adrian she needed. Forward motion that was hers. Something she was building. On the 3rd day, she called the legal aid organization Joanna had mentioned and spoke to a woman named Patricia Owens, who ran the East Side intake office and who had seen enough in 20 years to hear what wasn't being said as clearly as what was. "You want to do advocacy work," Patricia said. "I want to be useful," Clara said. "I want to talk to women who are where I was and tell them what I know." "What do you know?" Patricia asked. Direct, not unkind. "I know what it feels like when you file a complaint and nothing happens," Clara said. "I know what it feels like when the system hands you back to the person you're trying to report. I know what it feels like to be told you're nothing by someone who has money and power and connections, and to almost believe it." She paused. "And I know what it feels like when someone finally gives you a reason not to believe it." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Can you start next week?" she said. "I can start tomorrow," Clara said. "Next week," Patricia said firmly. "Give yourself a few more days." Clara gave herself 4 more days and then showed up at Patricia's office on a Tuesday morning and sat across from a woman who was 22 years old and hadn't slept in 3 days and was holding a phone with a crack across the screen and trying to explain why she hadn't just left sooner. And Clara looked at her and said, "You don't have to explain that to me. I already understand it. Let's talk about what happens next." She called Adrian that night. "I did something today," she said. "Tell me," he said. She told him, all of it. The woman who was 22, the cracked phone, the explanation that wasn't needed. He was quiet on the other end for a moment. "How did it feel?" he said. She thought about it honestly, the way she'd learned to think about things in the last 2 weeks, without the self-protective filter that had kept her surviving, but had also kept her small. "Like the first thing in a long time that felt like mine," she said. The statement happened on a Thursday. Joanna had arranged it with Cole's office, and the timing was precise. 2 days after the formal arraignment, which meant the charges were public record and the jury pool argument was neutralized, and 3 days before the first pretrial hearing, which meant the statement would be in the news cycle long enough to establish the public narrative before the legal proceedings took over. Clara wrote it herself. She wrote 4 drafts over 3 days, and she showed none of them to Adrian, which he respected. Joanna reviewed it for anything that could complicate the legal proceedings. Joanna had 2 notes, both minor, and Clara incorporated them, and then put the paper in her pocket and said she was ready. They held it at the steps of the Bellwood City Courthouse. Not because it was symbolic, Clara said, though it was. Because it was public. Because it was the most central, visible, undeniable location in a town that had spent 3 months being carefully arranged to make her invisible. Adrian drove her. She sat in the back with her hands in her lap and watched the town pass and didn't say anything for most of the drive. She was wearing her own clothes. She'd been able to go back to her apartment twice now, with a Marshall present to get what she needed, and she'd chosen something simple. Dark pants. A plain shirt. Nothing that said anything except, I am a person. I am here. I take up space. Are you nervous? Adrian said from the front. Yes, she said. No qualification. No minimizing. Good, he said. She looked at the back of his head. Good. Means you understand the size of it, he said. If you weren't nervous, I'd be concerned. She looked out the window. He's going to be watching, she said. Somewhere. Whatever screen he's watching the news on, he's going to see this. Yes, Adrian said. I want him to, she said. I want him to watch me say my own name in public in this town and know that he can't do a single thing about it. Adrian said nothing, but something in his expression visible in the rearview mirror was not nothing. There were more people than Clara had expected. She had expected reporters. Joanna had prepared her for reporters, the cameras, the questions, the way the press worked in the first minutes of something like this. She had expected a small crowd maybe, curious onlookers, people who had heard something and come to see. She had not expected Sandra Cowell. Sandra was standing at the bottom of the courthouse steps when Clara got out of the car, and she had driven 4 hours through the night to be there. And she looked exactly the way Clara had imagined from their phone calls, a little smaller than her voice, a little steadier than she sounded in the dark. She had unpacked boxes. She was wearing clothes that didn't come from the bag she'd been living out of for 8 months. She and Clara looked at each other for a moment. Then Sandra said, I wasn't going to miss this. Clara hugged her. It was the kind of hug that 2 people share when they have been through the same specific darkness and have come out the other side of it still intact. And Sandra held on, and Clara held on, and neither of them said anything for a moment, because there was nothing to say that the holding didn't already say better. When they separated, Clara saw that behind Sandra was another woman she didn't recognize. She was 31, dark-haired, with the careful posture of someone who had been watching for a long time and had finally decided to stop just watching. Greta Simmons, Sandra said. Clara looked at her. The Mercer Street building, Greta said. Her voice was steady, but it had taken something to make it that way. I filed a complaint 14 months ago. I know your name, Clara said. I know yours too, Greta said. Patricia Owens at the legal aid office told me you were starting there. She thought we might want to meet. She paused. I thought about coming for a week before I actually got in the car. What made you get in? Clara said. Greta thought about it for a moment. I figured if you could walk into a diner at 2:30 in the morning with cracked ribs and make this whole thing happen. She said, I could probably drive 40 minutes to a courthouse. Clara almost laughed. The same rough, fractured laugh from the kitchen at the safe house, the one that had tears in it. Fair point, she said. And then she turned and looked at the steps and the people gathered at the bottom of them, and the cameras beyond, and she thought about Victor Hale watching from somewhere in this town with his ankle monitor and his lawyers and his 9 years of carefully documented cruelty, and she took one breath, one full deliberate breath, and she walked up. Shachanti, My name is Clara Bennett. She said it first. Before anything else. Just that. Just her name in the air above the Bellwood courthouse steps in the town where a man had told her nobody would believe her, in the state where a senator had been paid to make sure the committee that was supposed to protect her didn't look too closely. Her name. Out loud. Hers. I'm 26 years old, she continued. I've lived in Bellwood for 4 years. I've worked double shifts. I've paid my bills. I've tried to do everything right. And for 3 months, everything I tried to do to protect myself was intercepted by the person I was trying to report. My complaint filings were delayed. My phone calls were flagged. The system that is supposed to exist to protect people like me was being used specifically to protect the person who was hurting me. She held the paper, but she wasn't reading from it. She'd memorized it 3 days ago. The paper was something for her hands. I want to say something to the people in this town who heard about this case and thought that happens to other people. That happens to people in different circumstances than mine. That happens to people who made different choices than I made. She looked at the crowd, not at the cameras, at the people. It doesn't. It happens to people who are $100 short on rent. It happens to people who work double shifts and still can't make the numbers work, and who are 1 bad month away from losing everything. It happens to people who do everything right and still end up standing in front of a diner door at 2 in the morning with nowhere left to go. She paused. It almost happened to me in silence. It would have happened in silence if I hadn't walked through that door, and if someone hadn't made the choice to help. She didn't say Adrian's name. They had agreed she wouldn't. Joanna had been clear about keeping his involvement out of her public statement for the legal proceedings. But she said someone, and she meant it with the full weight of what the someone had done. I'm not standing here to be anyone's symbol, she said. I'm standing here because he told me nobody would believe me. And I want to make sure that every woman in this town who has been told the same thing knows that he was wrong. I am standing here. My name is Clara Bennett, and I am standing here, and I am not nothing, and I was never nothing, and neither are you. She folded the paper. She was done. The silence that followed lasted 3 seconds, which is a long time for silence, and then it broke. Adrian watched it on his phone, parked half a block from the courthouse. He had not gone to the steps. This was hers. He understood that completely, that the moment needed to belong entirely to Clara, that his presence anywhere near it would shift the story in a direction that was about him and not about her. And this was categorically not about him. He watched the small screen. He watched her say her name. He watched her fold the paper. He watched Sandra Cowell and Greta Simmons standing at the base of the steps. And he thought about 200 miles and unpacked boxes and 40 minutes on the highway, and the specific courage of women who had been handed back to the people hurting them and had found a way to stand in a courthouse square anyway. Daniel called. "You watching?" he said. "Yes," Adrian said. "She's good," Daniel said. "She's better than good," Adrian said. "The press is going to—" "I know. Your name is going to come up regardless of what Joanna arranged," Daniel said. "Someone is going to connect the dots. That's inevitable." "I know," Adrian said again. He said it the same way he'd been saying it for 2 weeks. Not resignation, not strategy. Just the steady acknowledgement of a man who had made his choice and was living in its consequences and found the consequences more bearable than the alternative. "What do you want me to do?" Daniel said. "Nothing," Adrian said. "Watch. Let it be what it is." A pause. "Okay," Daniel said. And then, in a voice that was different from his professional voice, quieter, less managed. "She's going to be something, Adrian. Whatever she does next, she's going to be something." "She already is," Adrian said. He ended the call and kept watching the screen until the statement was done and the cameras were moving and the crowd was dispersing and Clara was coming down the steps toward Sandra and Greta. And the 3 of them stood together at the base of the courthouse steps, with the Bellwood morning around them. And the image of it. These 3 women standing in the square of a town that had tried very hard to make them disappear. was more than Adrian had expected to feel, and he let himself feel it anyway, because he had spent 22 years not doing that, and it had made him very efficient and very alone.
The
trial began 11 months later. 11 months of pre-trial motions and evidence hearings and Hale's lawyers trying every angle available, the tainted investigation angle which the judge dismissed, the entrapment angle which the judge dismissed faster, the character witness parade that Cole's team met with the ledger entry by entry, which effectively ended the character witness parade. During those 11 months, Clara worked at Patricia's legal aid office 4 days a week. She sat across from women who were where she had been, and she did for them what nobody had done for her. Until the night she fell through a diner door. She told them the truth about what was happening, what their rights were, what the process looked like when it worked, and what it looked like when it didn't, and what to do when the system failed them, and who to call, and how to keep calling until someone listened. She had 34 cases in 11 months. 34 women who filed complaints that were followed up on properly, whose calls were dispatched, whose concerns were taken seriously by a housing authority that had been reconstituted from the ground up after the indictments. Patricia told her at the end of the 11th month that she had a gift for it. "You don't make them feel like victims," Patricia said, "even when they are. You make them feel like people who are in a specific situation that has specific solutions." "Because that's what they are," Clara said. "Not everyone sees it that way," Patricia said. "Plenty of people in this work see the trauma and stop there. You see the person on the other side of the trauma, the one who is going to be standing somewhere after this is finished." Clara thought about that. "Someone did that for me," she said. "Showed me the other side, when I couldn't see it myself." Patricia nodded, not asking who, because it wasn't her story to ask about. "Whatever you want to do after the trial," Patricia said. "Law school advocacy, whatever direction you go, you have a place here as long as you want it. I want that on record." Clara looked at her across the desk. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me," Patricia said. "Show up on Monday." Clara showed up on Monday, and the Monday after that, and every Monday after that until the trial started, and she sat in the front row of a federal courtroom in a suit that was the best thing she owned and waited for her name to be called. The night before her testimony, she called Adrian. They had spoken regularly over the 11 months, not daily, not even weekly, but consistently, the way people stay in contact when they have been through something together that altered the shape of things, and neither of them pretends otherwise. He had sent a car when she needed to get somewhere safely. She had called him when the nightmares came back in month 3, and she needed to talk to someone who understood the full context without needing it explained. He had listened. He had not made it about himself. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," he said. "I'm not nervous the same way I was for the statement," she said. "At the courthouse, I was nervous about the words, whether I'd say them right, whether I'd be able to hold it together." She paused. "Tomorrow I'm nervous about something different." "What?" "That it won't be enough," she said. "That I'll say everything I have to say, and I'll say it correctly, and I'll be consistent and detailed and everything Joanna trained me to be, and it still won't be enough. That his lawyers are going to find the one crack and push through it, and the whole thing—" She stopped. "I know that's not rational. I know what Cole has. I know what the ledger says and what Reyes built and what the other testimony looks like. I know it's not going to fall apart on my word alone." "But," he said. "But it started with my word," she said. "It started with me walking into a diner and saying out loud what was happening. And tomorrow I have to do that again, but in a courtroom in front of the man who did it with his lawyers sitting there ready to take everything I say apart." She exhaled. "I just want to be enough." "Clara," he said. I know. "Listen to me," he said. Not sharp, steady. The voice she'd learned to stop and pay attention to because it didn't use that register carelessly. "You were enough the night you walked through that diner door. You were enough when you sat at a kitchen table for 6 hours reading evidence files when you had 2 cracked ribs. You were enough when you called Sandra Cowell and said the words that let her sleep in her own bed. You were enough for 34 women at Patricia's office, who now know their calls are going to be answered. He paused. The courtroom tomorrow is not the thing that determines whether you were enough. It's the last formality of something you already made happen. She was quiet. Say that again, she said. The last part. The courtroom is the last formality, he said, of something you already made happen. She let that settle. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. Another pause, comfortable, the kind that two people develop over 11 months of occasional long phone calls in the dark. Adrian, she said. Yes. After tomorrow, she said. When it's done, I want to have dinner, all of us. You and Daniel and Sandra and Joanna and Patricia and whoever else deserves to sit at a table and eat a meal that isn't in a safe house kitchen. She paused. I want to celebrate properly, with people who were there. Name the restaurant, he said. I'll text you, she said. Good night, Clara. Good night, she said. She put the phone down. She lay in the dark, her own bed, her own apartment. The locks changed in the building, now under new management following the receivership order that had come down as part of the civil proceedings, and she didn't sleep immediately, but the not sleeping was different from how it had been. It wasn't the vigilant, braced not sleeping of someone waiting for the sound of a key in a lock. It was the restless, anticipatory not sleeping of someone standing at the edge of something they'd been working toward for almost a year, which was an entirely different thing. She took the stand at 9:17 in the morning. Joanna had prepared her for everything. The layout of the room, where to look, how to address the judge, how to answer Hale's lawyers without being baited into anything, how to slow down when she felt herself speeding up, how to hold her own when the questions were designed to destabilize rather than illuminate. She sat in the witness chair and she looked at the jury. 12 people who had been selected over 2 days of voir dire, and who were now looking at her with the attentive, slightly cautious look of people who understood that what they were about to hear was going to require something of them. Cole's prosecutor, a woman named Deanna Walsh, who had worked with Cole for 8 years and had the particular sharpness of someone who genuinely hated what had been done to these women, asked her the first question. Ms. Bennett, Walsh said, in your own words, tell the jury what happened. And Clara told them. She told them about the $100, about the first conversation, about the way Hale had framed it, the words he'd chosen, the smile he'd worn, the certainty of a man who had done this before and knew exactly how it went. She told them about every time she'd said no and every consequence of saying no. She told them about filing the complaint with the housing authority and waiting and nothing happening. She told them about the calls to the non-emergency line and the cancellations she hadn't known about at the time. She told them about the deputy city attorney and the 3 flagged filings and what it felt like to know retroactively that every move she'd made had been reported back. She told them about the night. She didn't perform it. She didn't reach for emotion or pull at anything. She just described it the way it had happened, the push, the fall, the pain, the cold air, the diner lights, the man in the corner booth who had caught her before she hit the floor. She was on the stand for 4 hours. Hale's lead attorney, a man named Preston Cross, who charged $400 an hour and had a face built for courtrooms, spent 2 of those hours trying to find the crack. He went after her finances. She'd been behind on rent, hadn't she? Hadn't she been consistently delinquent? Wasn't it true that her complaint had the hallmarks of a tenant looking for leverage in a dispute about money? No, Clara said. You had documented financial difficulties. I was $100 short 1 month, Clara said. I paid it. I paid it within the week. After that, every payment was on time. She met Cross's eyes. Every month for 3 months I paid that rent on time because I did not want to give him a single reason to come to my door that I hadn't already given him. I was so careful. And he came anyway. Cross shifted angles, went after the timeline, suggested inconsistencies that weren't inconsistencies. Asked her 3 variations of the same question about whether she had any other reason to be in contact with Victor Hale that she hadn't disclosed. No, she said. Every time. Level. Clear. He went after Adrian. Obliquely carefully in the way that Joanna had prepared her for not naming him directly, but suggesting that Clara's account had been shaped by her association with certain interests that had their own reasons for pursuing Victor Hale. The man who helped me that night, Clara said before Walsh could object, helped me because I was hurt and alone and he was there. That's all. He drove me to safety and he called a doctor and he listened to what happened and he pointed me in the direction of people with the authority to do something about it. Everything that has come into this courtroom came from federal investigators using legal methods. What happened to me is in Victor Hale's handwriting in a ledger that he kept for 9 years. That's not my association with anyone. That's his. Cross paused. Walsh didn't bother suppressing her satisfaction. Cross tried one more angle. He asked Clara about the night she walked into the diner. He asked it gently, which she'd been warned was more dangerous than when he asked it sharply. You testified that you were at the end of your ability to cope, he said. That you were, in your own words, out of options. Is it possible that your perception of events that night was colored by your emotional state? Clara looked at him. She thought about the kitchen table at the safe house, about Adrian saying what happened to you is not your shame, about Sandra on the floor at the wall, about Greta driving 40 minutes, about 34 women in Patricia's office, about Tina Graves and her 45 minutes crying and her boxes of records kept because she believed someone would come. Mr. Cross, she said, I walked into that diner because I was out of options. You're right about that. She held his gaze. But I was out of options because every option I tried had been deliberately closed. Not because I was emotional. Because the man sitting at that table, she looked at Hale for the first time, directly, fully, without flinching, had paid people to close them. She looked back at Cross. My emotional state didn't create a 9-year ledger. He did. Cross said he had no further questions. Hale's lawyers put him on the stand. It was a miscalculation, and everyone in the courtroom who had been watching the case felt it the moment Cross announced that the defense would be calling Victor Hale. Cole's team didn't show any reaction, but Reyes, sitting behind Walsh, wrote something in her notebook and underlined it twice. Halu was composed on the stand. He was good. Clara had to acknowledge that sitting in the gallery next to Sandra and Greta, she had to acknowledge that the man was very, very good at presenting himself. Controlled, measured, the businessman, the community leader, the man who had contributed to the East Side Economic Development Initiative and the Bellwood Business Foundation, and 3 other civic organizations that Cross walked him through with the care of a man building a cathedral. He denied everything, not with heat, with the patient, slightly sorrowful certainty of a man who had been wrongly accused and was taking the high road about it. Walsh waited. She waited through all of it. She waited through Cross's gentle, careful questions and Hale's composed, carefully structured answers. She let him build the picture. She let the jury see the version of Victor Hale that Bellwood had seen for 30 years, the respected man, the civic contributor, the landlord who had helped revitalize an underserved district. And then she stood up, and she opened the ledger, not a copy. The physical ledger entered into evidence brought to the courtroom in a sealed evidence bag and now open on the prosecutorial table. Walsh picked it up and walked toward Hale on the stand, and she said, Mr. Hale, this is your handwriting. Not a question, a statement. He looked at the ledger. For 1 second, just one something moved in his face that hadn't been there through all of Cross's careful questions. Something that looked for the first time like a man confronting something he cannot manage. Counsel, Cross began. Your handwriting, Walsh said again. You have confirmed this in your deposition. Yes. A pause. Yes, Hale said. And this entry. Walsh pointed. Date amount service rendered. This is the notation you made regarding a payment to Gerald Finn in connection with a specific complaint filing. I don't recall every... Your handwriting, Walsh said. Your ledger, your notation. And this one. She turned a page, another entry. And this one, another. And this one, another. Her voice hadn't risen. It didn't need to. The ledger spoke at a volume that required no amplification. "Mr. Hale, you told this jury that you ran your business with integrity and in compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. You told them that the allegations against you were unfounded. You told them that the women who filed complaints against you were delinquent tenants looking for leverage." She set the ledger down on the rail in front of him. "Would you like to tell the jury whose handwriting that is?" she said. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Victor Hale looked at the ledger. Clara watched him from the gallery. She watched the moment the composure cracked, not broke, not shattered. He was too controlled for that, but cracked. A hairline fracture in the surface of the man who had spent 30 years telling people that he was untouchable, and mostly being right about it. He looked up from the ledger. He looked across the courtroom. He found Clara, and she held his gaze. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She sat in the gallery of a federal courtroom in the suite that was the best thing she owned, with Sandra Cowell on her left and Greta Simmons on her right, and she held Victor Hale's gaze across the room, and she did not move. He looked away first. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. Clara sat with Sandra and Greta in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the courthouse, and they drank coffee. They didn't taste and talked about things that weren't the trial. Sandra's new apartment, which she was decorating slowly, one piece at a time, because she'd decided that the apartment deserved to be chosen carefully, rather than filled in a rush. Greta's job, which she'd gone back to after the indictment, when the management company that had replaced Hale's in the East Side properties, turned out to want nothing to do with the old way of operating. Patricia's office, where Clara had 2 cases starting on Monday that she was already thinking about. They talked about Marie Tran, who had testified by video from Oregon, and whose testimony Walsh had called the most quietly devastating of the entire trial, because Marie had described Dumas coming to her door in the professional, polite way that Dumas had. And she had described exactly what she'd understood was being communicated, and she'd described it in the calm, flat voice of someone who has processed something so thoroughly that what's left is just the truth of it, stripped of everything else. 2 jurors had cried during Marie's testimony. One of them had been a man in his 60s, and he had not tried to hide it. At 4:41 in the afternoon, Joanna called. "They're back," she said. The verdict came in at 5:12. Guilty. On all 17 counts. Clara heard the first guilty, and then the rest of them arrived in a sequence that she could not afterward reconstruct in order, because they came too fast, and her body was doing something she couldn't manage. A shaking that started in her hands and moved through her and didn't stop, not from fear, not from cold, but from the specific physical effect of something held at enormous tension for an enormous length of time suddenly being released. Sandra grabbed her hand on the left. Greta grabbed it on the right. And Clara sat between them in a federal courtroom and listened to 17 counts read into the record, and she didn't say anything, and she didn't try to stop the shaking. And she let herself be held by the 2 women on either side of her, because some things you do not have to do alone. And this was one of them. Hale was taken into custody. He didn't look at Clara this time. Adrian was outside. He'd been in the building all day, not in the courtroom, not where he could affect or be seen to affect anything, but in the building in a hallway waiting. Because he was not a man who could have driven home and waited for a phone call, and he hadn't pretended otherwise. Clara came out through the side door with Sandra and Greta flanking her, and Joanna behind them, and she saw him leaning against the wall with his jacket on, and his hands in his pockets, and the look of a man who already knew the answer, but needed to see the person. She stopped. He looked at her face, at the red around her eyes, and the particular set of her jaw, and the way she was holding herself, not braced for the first time, not braced against something coming, just standing. Just present. Just taking up space in a hallway the way a person stands when they are not afraid of the space they're in. "Well," he said. "Guilty," she said. "All 17. He said nothing, but something in him settled visibly the way a building settles when the last piece of the foundation is secured, and he held her gaze across the hallway, and she held his back. "I told you," he said. "Last formality." "You told me." She agreed. She walked toward him and stopped when she was close enough and looked up at him, This man who had caught her before she hit the floor in a roadside diner at 2:30 in the morning, who had made phone calls and built evidence packages and handed everything to the right people, and who had sat in a hallway all day because he couldn't go home. "Thank you," she said. "You said that before," he said. "I'm saying it again," she said. "It doesn't expire." He looked at her for a moment. "You did this," he said. "I want you to know that. Not me. Not Cole. Not the ledger." He held her gaze. "You walked through a door when you had nothing left. Everything else followed from that." She thought about arguing. She thought about the cracked ribs, and the split lip, and the diner, and the table covered in evidence files, and Sandra on the phone at 2 in the morning, and 34 women in Patricia's office, and the witness stand, and Victor Hale looking away first. She thought about what it meant that she was standing here. "Okay," she said. "We both did this." He accepted that. The compromise of it, the fairness of it. Adrian Moretti, who compromised on almost nothing, accepted that. "Dinner," he said. "You said you'd text me the restaurant." "I did," she said. "I have a place. Saturday, 7 o'clock. She paused. "Wear something that isn't a dark jacket." He looked down at his jacket. Daniel, appearing from somewhere behind him, said, "She's right. You own other colors." "Daniel," Adrian said. "Just saying," Daniel said. Sandra laughed. Real clean, the laugh of a woman who had slept on her own floor for 8 months and was standing in a federal courthouse hallway with people who had become improbably and permanently her people. Greta laughed too. And Clara laughed, the same rough, fractured, real laugh from the safe house kitchen, the one with tears in it, the one that had no performance in it at all, and the sound of it filled the hallway and moved outward and didn't stop. Months later, when people asked Clara Bennett what had changed her life, she didn't say the trial. She didn't say the verdict. She didn't say the legal aid office, or the advocacy work, or the acceptance letter from the state law school that arrived on a Tuesday in early spring while she was sitting at Patricia's desk eating a sandwich. She said a door. She said, "I walked through a door at 2:30 in the morning when I had nothing left, and everything that came after the lawyer, the witnesses, the federal case, the 17 counts, the life I'm building, all of it, came from that one moment of choosing to keep going instead of stopping." And when they asked about Adrian Moretti, she said there was a man in the corner booth, a man that the whole town was afraid of. "And he caught me before I fell, and he said, 'You're safe now,' and he meant it." And the man who had spent 22 years building a reputation on fear discovered at 2:30 in the morning in a roadside diner that the most powerful thing he had ever done was decide that a woman who had been told she was nothing was worth every consequence of proving her wrong. Victor Hale went to prison. The network he had built across 6 counties collapsed under the weight of its own documented evidence. Sergeant Ray Dumas was convicted of obstruction and abuse of office and stripped of his pension and his badge. Senator Theodore Park resigned before his trial began, which his lawyers had advised, and it didn't help him, which his lawyers had also advised. Gerald Finn lost his license. Harold Breen lost his position. The deputy chief who had buried Ellen Marsh's report lost both. Ellen Marsh was promoted. Sandra Cowell moved back to Bellwood and unpacked every box. Greta Simmons started at Patricia's office 2 months after Clara on Clara's recommendation. Marie Tran stayed in Oregon, but she called every Sunday, and she and Clara talked for an hour every time, and the calls always started with Marie saying good morning and Clara saying good morning, and neither of them ever noting that it had once been a very long time since any morning had felt that way. And in a town called Bellwood, in a roadside diner on Callaway Road, where the fluorescent light above the entrance still buzzed and flickered, and the coffee was still never quite right. The corner booth sat empty most nights because the man who used to sit there had found at the age of 45 that the life he'd built in the dark could be exchanged one careful choice at a time for something that looked better in the light. The night Clara Bennett walked into that diner, crying that she couldn't bear the pain anymore, was the night she stopped being invisible. It was the night a feared man chose to become a protector. It was the night a town that had looked the other way for too long found that some truths once spoken aloud cannot be made silent again. And the woman who had been told she was nothing became the first voice a jury heard and the last word of a story that Victor Hale had believed until the very end that he controlled. He was wrong. She always was the one who controlled it. She just needed someone to catch her long enough to remember it.